Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Scion Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What if Deku had curse summoning Quirk? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. I'm sorry, but with such a quirk, you can't be a hero. You should probably just give up. Izumi skipped happily across the street. Most kids would be upset about having to go to school on a Friday, but Izumi didn't mind much. And more importantly, she'd seen a big villain acting out, and wanted to see the heroes working to apprehend him. Sprinting to the scene, she saw a metallic beam falling onto the spectators. She almost activated her quirk on instinct, when a muscular man, Death Arms, jumped onto the scene and caught the beam with his arms. Izumi, just like the others, gasped in excitement. And unlike the others, she immediately whipped out one of her journals and started writing about everything from their quirks to attire to tactics. In the meantime, Backdraft was making sure nobody was in danger with his water, and Kamui Woods leaped onto the bridge and was swinging around the big villain. Izumi was very excited. It wasn't every day she could see heroes fighting with her own eyes. At that point, Kamui had landed in a good position, and tensed for his best-known move, preemptive binding lacquered chain prison, which Izumi excitedly whispered with him. Yet before he could attack, a sudden appearance of another hero, who Izumi dimly recalled as being MT Lady, knocked the villain out, stealing Kamui's glory. Izumi sighed. I really wanted to see his move too, she complained mentally. She was still faintly excited after the battle, but the afterglow slowly faded as she finished the final notes and snapped the book close. Hey, you want to be a hero? A friendly bystander asked, noticing her notebook. That's great. You can do it. Izumi turned around, ducking her head. He wouldn't be saying that if he knew what my quirk was. But even so, she absent-mindedly wrung her hands, before looking up and hesitantly smiling. I'll do my best. I believe you wanted to go to UA, right Bakugo? The teacher asked. Indeed. Bakugo shouted, jumping up onto his desk. I aced all those mock tests. I trained my quirk to the limit. I'll join UA and become the next #1 hero. Izumi quietly sighed, tracing the lily patterns on her desk. Kacchan used to be her friend, the only one she ever had, in fact, and honestly she still thought of him as her friend, but he was so DMN proud of himself. Not without reason, of course. His quirk is awesome, and he trained both it and his body a lot in preparation for UA, but still. I could probably win quirkless against him by using a water hose. Or something else cold. He can't exactly sweat while freezing. Oh, Midoriya also wanted to go to UA, right? For a moment, it was silent, everyone turning to stare at her. Izumi wondered if she should use her quirk to disappear. It would have been fine if they just ignored her. She could even deal with them making fun of her. But this suspicion and distrust. I didn't ask for this. Her quirk was getting fairly agitated at the attention, bubbling in the back of her mind. Izumi ducked her head and gritted her teeth to keep it under control. Using it now would only prove them right in their hatred for me. I don't want to give them the satisfaction of being right. Seriously? Someone whispered. Her? The villain? Does she really think she can become a hero? Maybe she just wants to prey on the hero students. I pity her parents. Would have been better if the cursed girl was never born. Izumi squeezed her eyes shut and covered her ears. Don't do it, don't use your quirk, don't turn them into a fine paste dash. Luckily, eventually, the attention diverted away from her, allowing her to breathe a little more easily. After the last lesson of the day ended, Izumi was getting ready to leave when one of her classmates approached her. Midoriya, could we speak for a minute? Midoriya. The boy whispered, grasping her neck with his hand and squeezing a little as the other bullies surrounded her. Don't go to UA, K? Like the little Deku you are? Izumi barely had enough presence of mind to nod, which luckily satisfied the leader of the group and got him to release her. She landed on her hands and knees, breathing heavily. She barely flinched when one of the boys spat on her, before they all walked away. Izumi felt a little bit grateful at that. Controlling her quirk had been getting difficult, and she wasn't sure if she'd be able to hold it off this time if they assaulted her physically, or worse. Coughing a few times, Izumi managed to get up and walk to her dropped school bag and notebook. The latter, to be fair, was a decoy. Izumi had made a few of those, making random doodles and notes inside so bullies could damage those instead of her real, valuable notebook, which rested safely inside a hidden compartment in her bag. Picking up the decoy, she wiped off some of the dirt on it and found it to be nice enough to continue using. Putting it away, she started trudging back home. After a minute, Izumi sighed dejectedly, kicking a pebble down the road, feeling the despair in her heart again. Writing down UA on that paper was probably a bad idea. It's not like the school handles the applications. Their role is purely advisory. Unfortunately, no one really ever respected her desire to become a hero. That doctor told her to just give up. Her classmates' actions ranged from suspicion to outright bullying. Kacchan outright ignored her, the teachers always shot down all her aspirations, and her mom, Izumi, thought she'd rather pretend her quirk didn't exist, and her overprotectiveness to boot ensured that she didn't really support her dream either. Izumi avoided using or discussing her quirk in her presence to accommodate, but she hadn't been able to deny using it outright yet. When Izumi was younger, she could find strength in her spite to prove all of them wrong, to prove that she could become a hero even with her quirk. But, after so many years of everything being against her, there was only so far. Spite could carry her. Maybe they're right and I shouldn't go to UA. When I come home, I should probably rescind my application, instead applying to a regular high school somewhere. And then get a regular job somewhere? Perhaps become an accountant like mom. Or a secretary. At the very least, she'll be happy I won't risk my life as much. Izumi sighed again. She really missed her 3-year-old self. When she and Kacchan gushed over All Might, when she'd begun analyzing quirks by the hundreds. When the future seemed so bright and positive. And then their quirks came in. His was Explosion, a genuinely cool quirk with powerful applications in heroics. Hers, meanwhile, took an extra year to come in, and was evil to boot. A literal curse. One with potential for good, sure, at least she believed that, or rather needed to believe that, to remain somewhat sane, but she suspected that her quirk's very existence was a catalyst for at least some of the problems she saw. Sometimes, she considered whether the world would become better if she didn't exist in the first place. Though if anything, she had an inkling that suicide might only make the problem worse, if her quirk was to be believed. Sometimes, on a particularly bad day, that was the only thing preventing her from choosing the easy way out. Izumi looked at the bridge before her, before stepping under it. If nothing else, her quirk did provide her with an outlet, a reason to keep living, or rather, not choosing to end it all, a means to get comfortable with violence and a motive to actually train herself physically. She wasn't particularly excited about any of it, but at least it was something to do, and it wasn't like she was worse off due to any of it. At least it was better than constantly wallowing in her depressive tendencies. Her next step got interrupted by something mushy. Her gaze refocusing a little, Izumi noticed that a slime pile wrapped itself around her limbs and was trying to push into her mouth. Is it trying to kill me? Her brain seemed very slow on the uptake, and Izumi didn't really register what she should do, if anything. I didn't think that had come to the city. The villain crowed. Thanks for your help. You're my hero. Izumi twitched slightly from the villain's mocking words. Being a hero, like this, dying to a villain without accomplishing anything, she choked on the slime starting to slide into her throat, but her self-preservation instincts finally started working. I don't want to die like this. Her hand moved. A colossal black paint-like splotch appeared in front of her. Curse manipulation. Toshinori Yagi, better known by his hero name, All Might, burst through the manhole cover, yelling, "Detroit Smash," while punching the slime villain, who was already cowering away from someone else. And that someone was on their knees, coughing? Regardless, he destroyed the villain in a single punch. He grabbed an empty bottle from his bag and scooping up all the slime, successfully capturing him. Then, he looked a little closer at the victim, a green-haired schoolgirl, who seemed to slowly get her breathing under control. "Young lady, are you all right?" he asked in concern, approaching. "I'll be fine," she coughed a few more times, getting up and finally noticing who was talking, her eyes widening and her demeanor changing completely. All Might. Apologies for getting you caught up in this, young lady. I usually don't make mistakes like this, but this is a somewhat new place to me." He laughed to conceal his slight embarrassment. The girl didn't even seem to notice. All Might, it's you. She stuttered out, taking a step towards him. Could why you please sign dash. All Might laughed again, taking the offered notebook, quickly skimming through the notes to find an empty page. He had to admit, even at first glance, the notes, which were on heroes, quirks, and apparently anything interesting, looked genuinely impressive. Finding a page, he quickly jotted down his autograph, before returning the notebook to the girl. "Here you go, young lady. And those are some very good notes, I have to say. I regret not being able to appreciate them in full right now, but you should keep honing that skill." Thank you very much, All Might." The girl even began vibrating from what looked like excitement. "You're very welcome." He laughed again, before turning around. "Now then, I must take this guy to the police. See you later on the other side of the screen." All Might gave a wave to the girl, before turning around and squatting a few times. Then, he jumped 100 meters into the air, before humming. "Strange, I'm feeling a little heavier than normal dash. He glanced down, and saw the girl sticking to his leg. Hey, let go of me. That's too much fanaticism for a fan. The girl just shook her head, and pointed down. Oh, right, not everyone can fly. All Might remarked in slight embarrassment, quickly looking around and finding a nice spot to land, hoping to make it in time. Izumi sank to her knees, trying to keep her composure. She liked flying on occasion, and she could do it herself, but she'd never done it by hitching a ride on someone's leg. And All Might was so DMN fast. Even her strongest curses weren't as good as him. I'm very sorry about that, young lady dash, All Might began speaking, before starting to cough violently. Izumi looked up with concern, and didn't see All Might. Who the hell are you? She jumped up to her feet, almost activating her quirk on the spot. When did the skeleton man appear? There were like 5 seconds while I wasn't looking. Calm down. The skeleton man replied, before coughing up a little more blood. I am All Might. Izumi narrowed her eyes, scrutinizing him. Sure, he's wearing the same outfit, and the body structure is somewhat similar, but, do you need an ambulance, or something? She finally asked, worriedly. That drew a little laugh out of the skeleton, the familiarity of which reassured Izumi that this was indeed All Might. Thank you for the concern, young lady, but this has been the norm for me for the past 5 years. He sighed. Young lady, now that you know this, you mustn't tell it to anyone else. If people were to find out that the symbol of peace was not as unbreakable as believed, Izumi continued. It would cause a major panic. I understand. And I promise not to speak about it without your XPLCT agreement. Thank you. All Might nodded, sitting down and leaning towards the railing. Apologies if it isn't my place to ask, Izumi hesitantly spoke up after a few seconds. But how can you transform from this to the #1 hero? All Might seemed to think for a few seconds. It's a little like an athlete flexing their muscles. As for how I became like this, he sighed, before lifting his shirt. Izumi almost spat out from shock. What, in the world, is that? An injury. All Might responded, pointing to the purplish web-like wound on his side. 5 years ago, a villain managed to wound me, destroying my stomach and one of my lungs. Multiple surgeries and healing sessions ensured I wouldn't die from it, but I still regularly cough up blood and my active time has been reduced to 3 hours per day. A villain got you? Izumi whispered in shock. I don't think even Toxic Chainsaw could do that. Wait she recalled reading about something on the internet. Was that during the Tokyo incident? 5 years ago, I think. You know about it? All Might looked up in surprise. I only heard about it in passing. Izumi shook her head. But to think that a villain was strong enough to injure the symbol of peace. But you won, right? She asked, looking towards him hopefully. Yes. All Might sighed eventually, looking down. I did win. Izumi, seeing All Might lost in his thoughts, opted not to pry. Instead, she had a thought. It probably wasn't true, but... See, her quirk allowed her, among other things, to see cursed spirits at will. Curiously, she found that if she was actively looking for or at curses, her eyes would start glowing a little. When she wasn't, she could still see curses, but the visual tell would disappear. That was besides the point though. She just found it a little strange that no one was able to heal All Might further. Surely there are quirks able to ever so slowly STMLT even such injuries to heal? Sure, Recovery Girl is arguably one of the best healers in the country, but I'm pretty sure I've heard of a quirk that can force cells to start regenerating according to the desires of the user. It's slow and draining, but as far as I know, given enough time it can potentially heal even near-lethal injuries. If All Might wasn't, it would make a lot more sense, if something was keeping his injury as his dash. Izumi blinked, her eyes widening in confusion. I can't see it? Toshinori looked up, noticing the girl's glowing eyes. He wanted to ask if that was her quirk when her expression shifted into confusion. It even looked like she was seeing through him. Young lady, is something wrong? He asked in concern, getting up. The girl blinked, looking up towards him, her eyes no longer glowing. Then she looked away, taking a few steps to the side, seemingly still confused and mumbling about something he couldn't understand, only hearing something about a technique and unreachable? All Might was unsure how to address things, so he simply watched the girl processing for a minute. Sorry about that. The girl finally turned around. I had a question, if you don't mind. Yes? Toshinori asked, feeling a bit confused due to the sudden shift but opting to take things in stride. The girl straight up didn't answer for 10 seconds, before looking up apprehensively, almost fearful, and with a dash of resignation. Can a person with a villainous quirk become a hero? Like you? I'm assuming this is in relation to your quirk? He asked after a few seconds. Could you explain what it does? The girl seemed to think a few seconds, before hesitantly nodding and stretching out her hand. A black paint-like portal appeared in front of it. Out of it stepped one of the weirdest creatures All Might had ever seen. It had pale skin, an elongated head, only one eye, and 4 arms growing on its back, which it used to move itself. "You can summon these?" he questioned. Receiving another hesitant nod, he continued. "Why do you think it is villainous?" "I'll admit the creature looks strange, but I still fail to see the problem." The girl went silent for another few seconds, before answering. "They're called cursed spirits, or curses. These creatures are born when humans experience negative emotions. Fear, anger, pain, sadness, dying with regrets. All of them can spawn curses. Not to mention that literally cursing someone can occasionally cause a curse to be born. Sometimes immediately, sometimes after the person dies." All Might blanched slightly. The number of times he'd cursed that man. But almost all of them spawn in a different dimension, beyond this one. That's why most of them don't have any effect on reality. But sometimes, their emanations retroactively cause curses to be born in this dimension. Those curses are usually weak, but can hurt people. Most people can't see them either, unless that curse is actively hostile, and they generally tend to converge on my general area. And, the girl sighed. Often in the case of a literal curse, a curse can immediately become attached to a person in this world, causing illness, misfortune, or a myriad of other negative conditions. 9 out of 10 times, inexplicable ailments are caused by curses. Those curses are the stronger ones, by the way. But fundamentally, all curses are made up of negative emotions. They're even palpable if I don't suppress them. The girl whispered, making a gesture before the creature started oozing. All Might felt a shiver pass through him. "Okay, now I understand. Her a little better." Another gesture later, the heavy atmosphere vanished. "Well, my quirk allows me to see, capture, and use these curses. Evil beings. And these emotions? They scare everyone around me, and if I suppress them they whisper to me and seep into my soul and tell me to torture, maim, kill, dash." The girl cut off her frenzied monologue and shut her eyes, shuddering, seemingly unable to continue. Tashinori pondered for a few seconds. "I now understand why she's so negative about her own quirk. The fact that she has to bear all this negativity and fear is a problem, but that makes her even more admirable. I would lie if I said I never thought about the possibilities of that man's quirk being used for good. And this, it is the same thing. Perhaps even better. That man used it only for evil, but this girl? Despite life attempting to break her down, she seems to be determined to be good. Listen to me, young lady." All Might knelt before the girl, knowing what to say. "How much of this city do you think I could destroy in a few minutes? Or endeavor? And the slime man, his quirk would be excellent in rescue scenarios, flowing into collapsed buildings to save people. My point is, there is no such thing as a heroic or villainous quirk. The only thing that matters is what we choose to do with it." The girl's eyes flew open, looking at him in shock. "From what I can tell, you can control these curses. That means each curse you take is one that can't hurt people. That is the definition of a hero. Saving people. The fact that the curses are evil is not relevant. What matters is choosing to use them to do good." "All Might," the girl sniffed, before suddenly barreling into him and starting to cry. He wasn't really sure how to handle her crying, or any complex emotions, for that matter, so he just awkwardly patted her head a few times, waiting for her to let it all out. He understands. All Might really understands. He heard what my quirk is, and still said I could be a hero? Izumi sniffled again from the overabundance of emotions. "Someone believes in me. My very idol believes in me." After a minute of crying, Izumi finally got herself under control, stepping back and wiping her tears away with her sleeve. "Thank you, All Might. It means a lot to me." She earnestly responded, feeling like she was on top of the world. "You're very welcome, young lady." All Might laughed. It sounded really strange without his hero form. On that note, he suddenly got serious. "If it's not a bother, could you explain why you froze back then?" Izumi perked up at that, thinking for a moment, debating on whether or not to tell him. On one hand, lying to my idol is very wrong, but it's just a theory on my part. It might be just a random malfunction. And if that is a genuine curse, revealing that I know about it would likely cause it to become aggressive. While its technique could simply be related to concealment, it would still have to have decent strength, and something tells me that it might be something much more fundamental. Wouldn't be the first time my quirk tried to subtly feed me information in this way. Sorry, I just got confused for a second." She eventually opted to conceal it. "I'll need to speak about it to someone at some point, but it doesn't seem like All Might is in acute danger, so, best to let sleeping dogs lie, for now." Just out of curiosity, Izumi decided to double-check something, taking a small risk. Your injury. Has it been getting worse in some way, or refusing to get better? Especially without an explanation? And not that I can think of, All Might replied in confusion. I mean, the healer said that the injury was too grave to be healed further, but it hasn't been getting actively worse, I don't think. Why do you ask? Izumi did her best not to show her surprise. Did he seriously not connect the dots? I mean, even if he did, curses usually don't activate on suspicion alone, so it would have been fine. Maybe I'm worrying over nothing. Oh, no, I was just curious. She responded. Sorry to bother you. Don't worry, young lady, it was a simple question and no bother at all. All Might laughed. Well, young lady, I hope to see you as a hero in the future. He exclaimed, waving to her and turning to descend the apartment building. Izumi waved back as he exited, before collapsing on her back, letting out a breath and smiling. She couldn't wait to tell Mom about her day. Slime villain? Who cares about that? I met All Might. The All Might. He talked to me and autographed my journal. He even told me I could become a hero. Oh my gosh, I can't believe dash. Izumi took a few more breaths to calm down, which was more difficult than normal. It wasn't every day she was this agitated. Take that, world. Someone believes I can be a hero. Take that, all of you who thought I couldn't be one. All Might said I could, and as far as I'm concerned, his opinion is enough for me to continue on that path. Despite her excited thoughts, she was slowly calming down, beginning to daydream about the rest of her day. She would probably end up gushing about it at home to her mother for hours while eating katsudon. Then, she would lovingly put away her current notebook, an All Might autograph wasn't something she could afford to lose, and grab a fresh one. It was about time anyways, her notebook was mostly full already. She'd already started contemplating what she would do on the internet, perhaps look for more sightings of All Might and try to figure out what he was doing in Muzurafu, maybe figure out whether he's here to stay, when her thoughts were interrupted by a faraway explosion. Jumping up, Izumi saw plumes of smoke emerging in the distance. If I'm not mistaken, they're a shopping district in that direction. Noticing that she still hadn't unsummoned the forehand curse, she muttered an apology, making it collapse into smoke, before calling on a stingray curse, climbing on top of it and jumping off the building, using the curse as a weird paraglider. It wasn't fast, nor could it gain altitude very well, but it was also one of her cheapest to summon and control. Perfect for everyday use. Despite literally floating through the air, it still took her 2 minutes, and a dozen more explosions, to even land at the edge of the crowd, and another minute to get to the fairly chaotic scene. A large crowd of people stood assembled around it, being held back by a few heroes. She could recognize Kamui, Death Arms, and Backdraft. Closer to the center, large fires were engulfing the area, which Backdraft was doing his best at dousing. In the center, there was the slime villain again. And Kacchan. Izumi felt supremely grateful for how much she trained her control to use her quirk. Only that prevented her from immediately rushing onto the scene without thinking, though she could still feel herself twitching. Still, she knew she had to act fast. I'm not sure how long Kacchan is fighting, but he'll start suffering from either exhaustion or air deficiency soon. Why are the heroes not doing anything? Excuse me. She pushed through the crowd of people, muttering apologies, and poked Death Arms, who turned to glare at her. You do realize there's a civilian dying over there? Don't bother me, kid. Death Arms responded irritably. We can't get him out. Our quirks are not effective in this situation. All we can do is wait for a hero with a more suitable quirk. Izumi stilled from shock. Did he actually say that? I was wondering why 5 heroes weren't doing anything, but seriously? I can see at least 3 ways for them to get Katsuki out. And more importantly, they aren't even trying. Now, in a very rare moment for her, she felt herself getting angry. She rarely did experience it, and with her depressive tendencies, intense emotions in general were a rarity, but she thought it was completely justified in this instance. Not that she was about to justify herself, especially to them. I'm sorry for the kid, but he'll just have to bear with it. Izumi did not think it possible for her to get even more livid, but apparently she was wrong. He did not just say that. Alright, if you won't do anything, then I will. Ducking under Death Arms' arm and ignoring his alarmed cries, Izumi sprinted onto the scene, immediately preparing the curses she wanted. The slime villain seemed to notice her, his eyes widening. You again, you DMN brat? Izumi didn't bother with a response, instead summoning 2 small jellyfish and shooting them towards his eyes. When they impacted, the villain recoiled in pain, giving Kacchan a much-needed breath. His eyes seemed to ask a question, but she didn't acknowledge it either, instead summoning another blue luminescent jellyfish curse that could infiltrate and take over small bodies of liquid and manipulate them. She used to control the slime surrounding Kacchan, making the slime part around him and grabbing him with her, jumping away, Kacchan even loosing an explosion to boost them despite staring at her, torn between irritation and utter incomprehension. "Fing brat!" The slime heap shouted, surging after her. Izumi suddenly felt so done with it. She began moving her arm to let loose one of her stronger curses, when she got interrupted. "Have no fear," a loud voice shouted, prompting them both to turn to it. Izumi with relief, the villain with trepidation. "For I am here." All Might had arrived, blowing the villain away with a single punch. Izumi felt sudden exhaustion entering her limbs, all the adrenaline leaving her. She dismissed her remaining curses, before gently laying Kacchan down and dropping on her back next to him, closing her eyes, taking deep breaths to calm herself down. A few seconds later, Kacchan apparently had enough rest. "Hey, don't go dying on me right now." "I'm not dying." She opened her eyes again, smiling. "Just need to rest a little bit." "Oi, kid." Death Arms spoke up from next to her. "That was very reckless of you, running in like that dash." Sorry, Izumi stuttered nervously in reply, before realizing that she was about to start apologizing to the JRK who didn't even try to help Kacchan. Her anger was back in full force, her nervousness evaporating in an instant. "I didn't see you doing shit to help. So I couldn't care less about what you say. Be that as it may, using your quirk without a license is illegal dash." "Illegal?" Izumi asked incredulously, getting up. "Illegal? That's what you want to focus on? I wouldn't have had to jump in if you, any of you, didn't stand around like idiots. Sure, let's rely on the professionals, who were, oh wait, they weren't doing anything. Oi, didn't you see? Our quirks dash. You are a hero." Izumi interrupted him, walking up and jabbing a finger into his chest. "It is your literal job to help people. At the very least, Backdraft was genuinely busy controlling the fires. I'll allow that. You, by contrast, did nothing." She spat. "You and the other three. I couldn't care less about your quirk-related grievances. You had 5 heroes against a single villain. I can come up with at least 3 strategies for how to solve this incident on the spot, but that's irrelevant. What is important is that, if you continue to drag your feet, Kacchan would have died." Katsuki flinched at that. It's not a normal hostage situation when the hostage has a timed bomb strapped to himself. Regardless of whether you had a plan or not, you should have tried to do something. But you didn't. You're supposed to protect people, and you failed that today, plain and simple. So shut up and go retake your hero courses." She finished, grabbing Katsuki by the arm and stalking off like an angry lioness. The latter seemed so confused that he didn't even protest. "The heck was that? Heck was what? Don't play coy with me. It's about FING time you were standing up for yourself, but the hell was that hero insulting? Spree? Look me in the eyes and tell me I lied at any point." They'd stopped not far from her house, and Katsuki finally decided to talk. Well, in response to her query, he simply huffed and turned away. "Thought so. Though even that didn't restore my mood. I would have been fine without your help." Kacchan muttered. Izumi inwardly sighed at his pride speaking again. "I'm sorry if I offended you, but I'm not sorry for my actions," she replied. Before Katsuki could angrily retort something, she added. "You know that Endeavor has been trying his best to surpass All Might? Everyone knows that." He scowled. "Your point? What do you think he would feel if All Might died from a heart attack tomorrow?" Izumi asked, Katsuki widening his eyes in response. "I don't want a pile of sludge cutting the life of my friend." "Friend?" Katsuki stared at her, seemingly unable to understand what she felt should have been obvious. "Yeah." She shrugged, not comprehending what was so confusing about this, in her opinion, self-evident thought. "We've been friends since we were toddlers, right?" Katsuki seemed to have absolutely no idea how to process that, his mouth opening and closing multiple times. Eventually, he looked off to the side and muttered quietly. "If any of those shitty extras keep bullying you, I'll explode them next time." Izumi frowned at first at the thought, but then decided that convincing Kacchan would be a fool's endeavor. The days he backed down on anything were worthy of being declared national holidays. Eventually, she just shyly muttered an "okay." Kacchan huffed, pretending to look indifferent, before turning around and stomping away. Izumi just smiled, knowing that deep inside, he still cared. Then, she realized she was still feeling the irritation with those heroes' conduct, which was ruining her first genuine feelings of excitement in months. But, she knew how to work through both. Guess this calls for a visit to the cursed world. She opened a black portal, stepping through and closing it behind her. Toshinori sighed quietly, seeing the young girl disappear in a portal. He'd wanted to talk to her after her frankly impressive performance against the sludge villain. Both to address that and because he'd finally felt it. After 5 years, he finally thought he'd found a successor. After his fateful battle with All for One and the injuries inflicted, a lot of people close to him told him that he should search for a new successor for One for All. He kind of understood where they were coming from, but the issue was that he didn't really find anyone who he felt was right. There were a lot of good options, of course. Mirio, to name one. Night Eye had insisted about giving One for All to him, and while All Might could see that Mirio would probably be a good fit, he still thought that Mirio's original quirk, permeation, despite its complexity, would already make him a great hero, and he was unsure whether piling One for All on top of that would be a good idea. It was one of many things that drove an irreparable wedge between him and Night Eye. He'd looked among other heroes, but in his opinion, they were doing fine on his own. He'd looked through the students, but despite the many good options, he didn't find anyone fitting. He'd even looked among the quirkless, thinking that he might find someone who wanted to be a hero but didn't have the necessary power and fulfill their dream, like his mentor had done for him. But still, he didn't find a successor. Eventually, after a lot of convincing, he accepted Nizu's offer to become a teacher at UA and hopefully find a successor by working a little closer with the kids. Though at that point, he honestly thought he'd have to hand over One for All to a random good kid, perhaps even Mirio, not finding the one. He was feeling a little distraught about that. Until today. When he'd found her. The young girl, who despite her supposedly villainous quirk, selflessly rushed onto the scene when even literal pro-heroes hesitated, saving the hostage and almost defeating the villain on her own. He barely had to do anything. And then she even ruthlessly chewed out the heroes for their conduct, while still giving fair points to Backdraft since he was actually doing something worthwhile. While he'd seen both traits before, this time, both he and One for All felt that feeling. In that moment, All Might thought that he'd finally found his successor. Yet, when he wanted to talk to her, the girl walked away through a portal, slipping through his fingers. Now, All Might was hesitating. Perhaps this is a sign? Could I have chosen incorrectly? I think I'll gather more information first. It's not like she's going anywhere. I guess I could talk to Naomasa about it. He sighed, before starting his trek to the police station. Izumi let out an involuntary exhale, stepping out onto the desolate earth of the cursed world. She didn't exactly enjoy the atmosphere, since the very essence of this world was unpleasant, and even without that, it looked like the corrupted version of the real world, which never failed to give her depression. Unless it was a particularly bad day of bullying. Then, she just found solace in either the silence or in fighting hundreds of curses. Looking around, she saw that she was warped out in the Alt Muzutafu. Around her were destroyed and dilapidated ruins of the buildings she was familiar with, some of them distorted into weird forms. At least I didn't get dropped into the ocean this time. The constantly morphing connections between this world and the real one can be a pain. Summoning her floating stingray, she found an updraft created by the weird dynamics of this world, using it to fly onto one of the buildings. Looking out into the distance, she saw the broken ruins of UA, which made her heart clench. It always felt like she was seeing an alternate version of the present, perhaps one where All Might lost against that villain or never existed in the first place. Then, she heard a faint choir singing in the distance, which instantly made her turn her head away. Looks like the siren curse is still there. The siren was one of the stronger curses located in this area, almost like a boss monster. Found in the ruins of fake UA, it had a curse technique allowing it to exert a certain amount of control over weaker curses and, presumably, other living creatures. From what Izumi knew, it was weaker in that regard than curse manipulation, only giving curses vague directions instead of XPLCT commands that Izumi used. However, it was still able to utilize its technique to gather a veritable army of curses in its vicinity. Combine that with its impressive base stats and the fact that it even had a domain expansion, which only 2 of Izumi's curses could pull off, currently, with one being a fairly weak and useless domain and the other often too destructive to use and too much of a drain on herself, and it was a daunting target that she didn't try to fight yet. Though that doesn't mean I'd refuse to fight anyone strong today. Finding a group of curses on a floating part of a skyscraper, it appeared to have been warped there from another location and was floating horizontally, making a frankly impressive bridge between 2 other buildings. She flew towards them. For the first minutes, she wasn't planning to use her curses, instead focusing on another application she discovered a few weeks ago. Cursed energy. Frankly, it was something Izumi had never considered. Her quirk was already pretty strong by itself, giving her incredible versatility and long-range capabilities. And unlike most other quirks, she had a direct way to keep getting stronger, by fighting and absorbing more powerful curses. Add to it that her quirk operated like a curse technique, meaning she may eventually acquire a supreme art, like an ultimate move, but for a cursed technique, and possibly a domain expansion, and she never considered going even further. But a few weeks ago, out of sheer boredom, Izumi had an idea to try to leech the essence of one of her strongest curses, whose technique caused earthquakes. She didn't actually use its technique much due to its destructiveness, as it very difficult to contain its effects in a small area, but she wanted to see if that could perhaps give her a charge of the technique to use for herself, just as a concept. Logically, she thought it would either not work or hurt her, since curses were composed of cursed energy, essentially negative emotions, and harmed living humans if allowed to. But instinctively, she believed it was worth a shot. And since instincts were usually her quirk telling things, she was comfortable enough following them. In the end, unfortunately, it didn't work. Izumi was unable to maintain the form, for lack of a better term, of the energy, but she suspected that there was still a chance it could still work later, and that she was simply not experienced enough to accomplish it right now. And in the process, she discovered something significantly more powerful. When she drew the essence of her controlled curses to herself, her body automatically converted it into her own cursed energy, that she could store and use without harming herself. That was so unbelievably valuable that Izumi gave herself so many facepalms for not discovering it sooner. For now, it only covered one of her largest weaknesses, namely her poor close-range capabilities. She had some curses that could double as armor and weapons, of course, but they weren't exactly easy to use, but strengthening her body was still insane. It was one of the things she admittedly really lacked before. And if her quirk was to be believed, cursed energy could be used for a trove of other moves, though she had no concrete ideas as to what, since the suggestions were still very vague. Still, if nothing else, she believed she could eventually get her cursed energy control to such a level where she could maintain the shape of the cursed energy from her spirits, effectively granting her direct control of their techniques as she initially intended. Even more importantly, as long as she didn't take too much of it, curses could regenerate their own energy over time. In a way, it was like shearing wool off a sheep, providing a degree of renewability. The issue was that weaker spirits, meaning a large part of her arsenal, had barely any reserves before the process would become irreversible. Effectively, she either had to shear energy off of hundreds of weaker spirits at once, or tap into the stronger ones, which then diminished the strength of her best weapons. So there was a trade-off. Though as long as she didn't need ludicrous amounts of energy, she could just use some spirits she rarely needed as batteries. Shaking away her musings and finally landing on the skyscraper, Izumi saw that the curses had noticed her and began turning towards her. Momentarily feeling a shiver at the sheer negativity in their being, she banished her fear and instead focused on her excitement at being acknowledged by All Might, and her simmering anger at those heroes. In response, both her technique and her stored cursed energy flared, the latter coalescing to strengthen her body. The closest group of curses screeched, beginning to run at her, the strongest one ahead of them. Izumi just grinned, readying the extraction part of her quirk and meeting the curse's flying fist with her own. The resulting shockwave made the entire building shudder. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked All Might, who was in his skinny form, and therefore not recognized, when the latter finally reached the station. "Ah, yes, could you get Detective Tkotka for me? Just tell him that Toshi wants to speak with him." Sure," the receptionist frowned, seemingly confused about what a civilian could want from the detective, but still began typing. Luckily, after only a minute, Naomasa walked out of a side room, his expression brightening upon noticing him. "Ah, Toshinori. Come on in." Naomasa waved Toshinori after him, the latter shooting him a look of gratitude. Toshinori entered the detective's office after him, immediately noticing the scattered papers on the desk. "Sorry about the mess." Tkotka smiled. "Are you here on business, or?" "No, just a friendly visit." Toshinori shook his head, before nodding at the papers. "Difficult case? HM? Oh no, I've already solved it, just didn't have the time yet to clean everything up." Naomasa smiled, sitting down on the chair. "So, how's your day been?" "Well, I've explored Muzudafu, defeated a villain. So, it went adequately, I'd say." All Might chuckled. "Ah, yes, I saw it on TV." Naomasa smiled in response. Toshinori stiffened a little, before deciding to just ask the question. "Have you also seen the girl that jumped onto the scene before me? What do you think of her?" Naomasa frowned in response. While her heart seemed to be in the right place, she shouldn't have interfered. Even if she saved the hostage, unlicensed quirk usage is still vigilantism. At her age, she shouldn't have proper training yet, so her actions could have only made the situation worse. She should have simply stayed back and let the other pros handle this. Or you even. I had to strain my time limit. Toshinori frowned as well. Plus, she didn't exactly know that I was in the vicinity. And as much as I respect the other pros, they weren't actively doing anything to save the hostage dash. Rule number 1 of hostage situations: do not aggravate the hostage taker unless victory is absolutely assured. Naomasa retorted. We're lucky that the villain didn't instantly kill the hostage out of spite if nothing else. That's why situations like this are better left to trained heroes. Why, you're right, Toshinori nodded weakly, lowering his head, feeling his uncertainties flare up again. What if I'm mistaken? What if she's not the one? Naomasa is certainly antagonistic towards her. I feel like he might be misinterpreting the situation, but I have an incomplete vision myself. I heard the girl yelling something at the pro coming to check on her, but I was a bit too swarmed by the public to hear anything clearly. I need more time to think this through. It's not like she's going anywhere. They continued to talk about other mundane topics for a few minutes. They even got on topic of him taking on a teaching position next year, with Naomasa recommending he ask Nizu to sit in on some lessons in his civilian identity, getting some much-needed teaching experience. Toshinori, reluctantly, had to admit that the idea had merit. He hadn't exactly taught anyone yet, and if nothing else, the green-haired girl proved that he had to be better prepared for interacting with hyperactive children. If one jumped on my literal leg for a question, others won't be far behind. Then, Naomasa apologetically told him he needed to get back to work, which Toshinori completely understood. They said goodbye to each other, and Toshinori left the station, starting his walk back home. Only then did he realize that he forgot to ask Naomasa about the topic of One for All. DMN. Izumi cursed through her teeth, jumping onto the steel beam below her as her previous vantage point was completely obliterated by another sonic blast. Landing on it and barely managing to not fall further, she sprinted over the beam to the undamaged part of the skyscraper. When she almost reached it, a sound blast severed the steel beam. Izumi summoned a worm curse in response, having it extend itself to stick to the skyscraper, then retract to boost herself inside. Finally, in relative safety, she took a few breaths to center herself again. Her excursion had gone alright for about 15 minutes. Izumi fought curses, absorbed those that looked somewhat useful and destroyed the rest. It was completely fine, nothing out of the ordinary. And then it got ruined by the white whale curse showing up. The white whale curse. Born from, presumably, either fear of the depths or specifically whales, it resembles a completely white beluga. The only difference is that it's huge, its length being upwards of several kilometers. Its technique apparently treats the air as a liquid, allowing it to float as if unaffected by gravity and amplifying its directed sonic blasts, which from what I can tell are not the result of a technique, but are simply created by its impressive vocal cords and shaped and reinforced with cursed energy. Furthermore, it can create smaller clones of itself, which have all the characteristics of the main body. The only silver lining I have is that it's pretty lazy, content to let 2 of its clones hound me. Though the fact that they fly is making things difficult enough. I could probably succeed in reaching the main body if I wanted, but right now I'm simply not equipped to fight it at that point. Which means, running it is. Right as she thought that, the entire structure of the building shuddered and groaned, sounding like it was collapsing. Flicking her eyes around, Izumi darted to the nearest wall and punched through it, getting outside and summoning her stingray curse, trying to float to the other skyscraper. Of course, she had to interrupt that action when the second clone noticed her and dashed towards her, loosing a sonic blast ahead of itself. She summoned a sponge-like curse in response, hiding in its empty interior. It had a shock-diffusing structure, perfect for protecting herself against impacts. Izumi grit her teeth as the blast reached her, reverberating through her. It hurt, but at least the sponge ensured it was significantly weakened, ensuring it didn't deal significant damage. She quickly dismissed her curse and was about to summon another when the whale clone also reached her, grabbing her in its jaws and speeding away. At least its fairly weak jaw strength and lack of teeth meant she didn't need much cursed energy to prevent it from harming her, and her sideways position in its mouth ensured it couldn't consume her. Though note to self, always bring an extra disposable outfit with you for excursions like this. I can't always rely on my curses taking the brunt of the damage. Wiggling herself a little and freeing her arm, Izumi summoned a swarm of small leech curses, as well as another big worm, wrapping all of them around the clone that was holding her. Compared to the main body, the clones didn't have that much energy reserves. The extra weight and energy drain were more than enough for the clone to start dropping altitude, and helped loosen its jaw enough for Izumi to rotate herself into position, channeling most of her cursed energy into her fist, and driving it into the curse's palate. The force behind her strike was enough to sever the entire upper half of the clone's head, exorcising it in one strike. Of course, that also meant that Izumi was in freefall. Dismissing the leeches and the worm, she resummoned the sponge curse, forcing it to grow a few extra layers. After a few seconds, it slammed onto the ground, absorbing a good portion of the impact, with her cursed energy reinforcement handling the rest. Dismissing the sponge spirit, Izumi fell on her knees, taking a few shaky breaths. Then, she finally chanced to look around, and her eyes widened. "Oh, that SCKS." she murmured. She fell into the hospital. Inko was exhausted. She hadn't slept well today, constantly tossing and turning in her bed and having nightmares in the little amount of time she had actually been able to sleep. In the morning, she had broken one of her favorite plates when preparing breakfast, almost waking up Izumi, and had almost forgotten to take her bag with her. Then everything she was working with was not cooperating at all for the rest of the day. Her computer crashed 4 times and the programs lagged constantly, which combined with her fatigue didn't make her job easier. And finally, when she was almost done with her day, she had to sit through an embarrassing meeting with her boss, who berated her for her dropping performance. Inko staggered out of the building, fiddling with her phone and doing her best to maintain a fine enough appearance, so that no one started to worry. Despite her ringing ears and blurring vision, she finally managed to sort her documents how she wanted. She went to turn off the phone, but accidentally missed and opened social media instead. Quietly chastising herself for the mistake, she moved her fingers again when a video on her front page caught her attention. Inko slowly came to a stop when her tired mind finally processed what she was seeing. Even in this state, she'd never mistake her daughter, her dear Izumi, for anyone else. Her heart clenched when she saw Izumi using her quirk on the slime villain. She shouldn't have to do that. She shouldn't suffer like that. Yet still, her daughter managed to save the hostage, who Inko dimly recognized as Katsuki, after which All Might dealt the final blow. The video ended. Her ears continued to ring. Stars danced at the edge of her vision. The pure exhaustion clung to her. A mix of complicated emotions rose inside of her. Inko shook it all away. "I'll process it at home, when I'm feeling a little better. My daughter deserves more than the decrepit wreck I am now." Gathering the final bits of her strength, Inko continued walking home. Izumi sat cross-legged in the hallway, while a few dozen curses were slowly spreading through the building. She kept watch of any that got destroyed, hopefully getting an idea of her enemy's location. Outside, she could still hear the whales humming, which meant it was probably still looking for her. This meant that as much as she didn't want to be in the hospital, leaving would immediately attract the attention of the whale, and she didn't exactly want to fight it again without at least recuperating a little. The reason Izumi was reasonably cautious of the hospital was the nurse, a powerful curse haunting the building. While weaker than the siren in terms of cursed energy, she was much more adept at fighting directly. Her technique allowed her to generate and fire scalpel blades. While they could not be controlled in flight, they could adopt simple curved paths, allowing them to go around walls or attack from unconventional angles. That alone would have been fine, but the scalpels also had a deadly on-hit effect. After hitting a living creature, more specifically enough to bleed, the curse could drain their blood to heal herself, with the amount proportional to the throughput of the vein hit. No, I'm not telling how I discovered that. Mom would murder me. For curses, she could take their cursed energy as purple blood, the amount directly proportional to damage. And for any blood outside of bodies, it drained the entire interconnected pool of blood. This made the nurse into a deadly opponent, who Izumi had only attempted to exorcise once multiple years ago, before booking it when she figured out her technique. Now though, she felt a lot more confident in taking it. She had more and better curses, she could reinforce herself with cursed energy, and the strength disparity was simply more in her favor, which would make absorbing the nurse easier, since her quirk's condition for absorbing would trigger earlier. Furthermore, while the blood draining was deadly, the regeneration wasn't terribly efficient, which meant that if Izumi had an infinite amount of weaker curses, they would still grind the nurse down faster than she could heal. Just as she thought that, Izumi felt one of her scouting curses disintegrating before the connection snapped. The foyer, huh? On one hand, the abundance of space will make approaching difficult, but on the other, it gives me space to maneuver. Engaging in close quarters would just leave me open for receiving 24 scalpels in the face. Getting up, she summoned a tiger curse, sending it slightly ahead while she followed, slowly trekking to the foyer. After a few minutes of walking, Izumi heard a rumble which prompted her to move more quietly. She slowly sneaked into the foyer, and had to resist exclaiming from shock. Half of the room was partially destroyed or collapsed, with another dead whale clone slowly turning to ash in the middle. And the nurse? Apparently they fought. For some reason. If curses could breathe heavily, that's what she'd be doing right now. Part of her body had been obliterated and her entire structure seemed unsteady. Trying to maintain her entire body without the energy reserves for it, resulting in an unstable structure? Dozens of marks were scattered on the floor and walls, indicating scalpel misses. "Peepaw, Tyant?" a voice croaked. Izumi squeaked suddenly, ducking and summoning a turtle curse to absorb a second scalpel attack. She discovered by pure chance that more armored parts of curses are less susceptible to the draining effect, with the inverse being also true. This made the turtle a good defense mechanism. Okay, stop. Less thinking, more fighting. Letting her tiger sprint to the right, she dismissed the turtle and ran to the left while also reinforcing herself with cursed energy to distract. Like any curse, the nurse seemed to prioritize targets with the most cursed energy first, turning towards her and firing more scalpels which she again absorbed with the turtle. A fourth attack didn't come. Her tiger ran up to the nurse and knocked her over, interrupting her movements. Izumi sprinted out from behind the turtle and, while preparing more curses to throw at her, reached out to her with her quirk, fully expecting to be rebuffed. And then she didn't. What? The nurse distorted in the air, her essence swimming with some shrieking towards her hand, before finally coalescing in a small crystal sphere, red liquid swimming inside. I was expecting a longer fight. Well, lucky me, I guess. She even thought for a moment that this was some imposter, but the fact she was absorbed into a sphere meant otherwise. While she could subsume weaker curses directly like simple energy through her arms, stronger ones, and all those with a technique had to go through this roundabout process of turning into a sphere that she had to swallow to absorb the curse. Interestingly, the sphere seemed physical in that other people could see it, and could persist indefinitely as long as Izumi maintained it. So she wasn't sure where it went after swallowing. Her best guess was it simply disintegrated without a trace. Each sphere also had subtle differences depending on which curse was contained inside. The nurse's had red liquid, appropriate for her blood-related technique, for example. On that note, Izumi was a bit unsure whether each sphere was unique, or if she reused some baseline sphere object innate to her quirk. She had a feeling it was the former, simply a different form of cursed energy, so to speak, and yeah, the detailed answer meant it probably came from her quirk, which also meant it was probably true, but her brain demanded conclusive evidence, and she was just getting started on all things cursed energy. On that topic, aside from everything related to curses, her quirk also seemed to have a built-in guide of sorts. Sometimes, when she encountered a curse, it nudged her towards certain deductions and realizations, essentially subtly providing information. More importantly, it was how she discovered the cursed world's existence in the first place, as well as some details about its different physics. It was also how she knew how cursed techniques worked, what supreme arts and domain expansions were, and also all of the associated names. And now, it was nudging her towards certain applications of cursed energy, which she would be totally trying out sometime later. All in all, it was very helpful to have, instead of floundering about in the dark. Shaking her head to get rid of the unnecessary thoughts, Izumi steeled herself and put the orb in her mouth, swallowing it. An intense shiver went through her for a few seconds as she digested the curse, before she slumped over, feeling the nurse settle in her soul. That was probably the best approximation. Feeling a sudden exhaustion in her limbs, she dismissed the tiger and laid down on the ground, closing her eyes and taking a break for a few minutes. After a few minutes of resting, Izumi got up again, stretching a little. Then, she cautiously snuck to the destroyed part of the foyer and climbed outside, surveying the sky. Luckily, the white whale was nowhere to be seen. Letting out a relieved breath, Izumi found a nice perch and sat down, looking out over the ruined city for a bit, thinking in the meantime. One of the most interesting conundrums she had was what the cursed world actually was. At first, Izumi believed that it simply copied and warped the normal one, while also serving as a curse breeding ground, with her quirk being the only natural way to access it. But there were some strange phenomena that contradicted the theory. First, she'd found some landscape phenomena that didn't seem to arise from spatial distortions native to this world. She had a subconscious feeling when a distortion was in play, nor had any equivalent in the real world. A large scar in the landscape not far from Tokyo, stretching to a few kilometers in length, was the most prominent example. Second, she'd found a few objects, less than a dozen, but still, that were corrupted, but obviously man-made. Like metal cans and similar small objects that the cursed world didn't copy over from the real world, as far as she knew. And cursed energy was another contradiction. See, strictly speaking, humans with cursed energy didn't seem to exist in her normal world. Izumi had never met anyone utilizing cursed techniques, or cursed energy in general, and despite curses obviously being born from negative emotions, at least if her quirk and some indirect evidence was to be believed, she'd never actually sensed those emotions, not even after beginning to utilize cursed energy herself. Her first theory was that those emotions were slowly being drained away into the cursed world. But that didn't make much sense lately, because she should have been able to sense it in some way for one, but more importantly, she couldn't determine its absence either. In programming terms, it was a bit like encountering a null value. In a way, it felt like the humans she knew didn't possess an OS equivalent for cursed energy. The only two exceptions were herself and her mom, with the latter's cursed energy levels being low enough to be unnoticeable. So she believed that being in proximity of cursed energy for prolonged PRDS could force a human to, in a way, become compatible with cursed energy. And on further reflection, cursed energy might still be transferred to the cursed world, only with the mechanism being the natural incompatibility of humans. And if a cursed spirit was attached to a human, they would probably end up leeching it instead. By contrast, the cursed world was absolutely flooded with cursed energy. At least compared to what she would expect, and even allowing minor spirits to hide their signatures from her. Izumi was unsure why she remained unharmed from it, since she had a feeling that a normal human would quickly start experiencing bad symptoms, but she supposed it was a secondary effect of her quirk at work. Also, she was still figuring out how to draw cursed energy from the atmosphere, but she believed that if she figured that out, she'd have an effectively inexhaustible supply of cursed energy. At least in this world. This point, by the way, combined with the first, provided a hypothesis on why most cursed spirits spawned here and not in the normal world, namely that the environment was significantly more amenable here, and perhaps that there was no cursed energy to feed off of in the normal world. The spirits that did exist in the normal world then probably took a supply of cursed energy from this world, before manifesting in the real one. This didn't explain why they did it, nor the existence of curses bound to a person, which could appear directly as far as she knew, but it was a lot better than no hypothesis. And altogether, these points provided an interesting, and scary, hypothesis on what this world was. Namely, what if a civilization existed in the cursed world, long ago? Perhaps where humans had and used cursed energy instead of quirks, and something, probably cursed energy related, killed them off, flooded the atmosphere with cursed energy, entangled it with our world, and caused all these weird spaceshift phenomena? It would frankly explain a lot, for example where these cursed spirits come from, most of the points I mentioned before, and it would make my quirk much more logical, not generating an entire world from nowhere, but simply providing passage to it. Realizing she got a bit too deep into her thoughts, Izumi shook her head. Okay, that's enough for today. I should return and go eat something, probably. Standing up and doing a few mental calculations, Izumi jumped down and sprinted for a kilometer away from the hospital, avoiding any curses in the meantime. Finally arriving in the area that should take her home, by her estimation, Izumi opened a portal, stepping through it and leaving the cursed world behind her. Walking outside, she saw that she didn't teleport straight to her home, but being half a kilometer off wasn't bad, considering she wasn't in any hurry really. Shrugging and catching herself patting her down subconsciously, she cycled her cursed energy for a second to rid herself of the clinging emanations, before starting her trek home. Hey Mom, I'm home. Izumi called out into the darkness after closing the door behind her. When nobody responded, she frowned, trotting over to her mom's room. Seeing no one there, she walked over to the living room, not seeing anyone either. Normally, she's already home at this point. Though maybe she got held up by work. Wouldn't be the first time. Though if she takes more than an hour, I'm calling her. Shrugging, she went back to her own room, giddily taking out her notebook with the All Might signature and marveling at it. I still can't believe it. I met All Might. He signed my notebook. He complimented my notes. Izumi grinned. That was particularly special to her, as her analysis hobby wasn't exactly liked by others. Her mind always gushed about everything she saw, quirks in particular, but also heroes themselves, their support gear, cursed spirits, and now cursed energy. But she had to admit it herself, it was creepy on occasion. She literally thought about everything, from potential moves, improvements, and combinations to ways to disable a certain quirk, or even to take out, kill, the person. She couldn't really help herself, and instead tried to make sure that those hypotheticals wouldn't ever actually need to be used. Still, her analysis in combination with her quirk made her largely ostracized at school. But All Might liked it. Izumi continued lovingly staring at the page for a minute, before glancing up. Oh, I could probably frame it on the wall. It might be pretty mundane at first glance, but it's special to me. She went to grab her scissors before stopping. No, I should probably wait until Mom is here. And I should make some food for her. If she's late, she'll probably be tired. Gently closing her notebook, Izumi hopped off her chair and went to grab a new one from her shelf. Okay, that will be number 14. Inscribing the title and number onto the book, she carefully placed it in her school bag, so she wouldn't forget it. Then, she moved through the living room and to the kitchen, grabbing pork from the fridge and the other ingredients from the cupboard. While her cooking skills, in her opinion, were inferior to her mother's, she knew at least how to make decent katsudon. How couldn't she, considering it was her favorite meal? Even if she much preferred her mother's version, sometimes she did have to make food herself. Mom shouldn't do everything either. Idly humming, Izumi started preparing the ingredients while absent-mindedly thinking. Actually, what is All Might doing in Mizutofu? Might Tower is in Minato, not here. It wouldn't be inconceivable that All Might is simply on vacation here, but he said that Mizutofu is new to him, implying that he's getting to know it, which means he's probably here to stay. As for the reason? UA. That's what first comes to mind. By my estimates, he should be in his 40s, maybe 50s. Perhaps he wants to become a teacher, to pass on his experience to future generations. Though it's just a theory, and there are other explanations. Ow! While cutting the pork, Izumi lost herself in her thoughts completely, and as a result managed to cut her finger on the knife. She stared, mutely, at the blood flowing from the wound. She still remembered the first time she cut herself. After an awful day at school, her spirits were being very loud, her control was still weak at the time, and when she was cutting her nails in the evening, she accidentally misestimated the distance and cut herself in the finger. She still recalled staring in morbid curiosity at the blood flowing down the drain, and feeling lighter for just a moment. After that day, it became a coping mechanism she occasionally used. To be fair, literally any source of physical pain helped. Stretching beyond her normal limits, fighting curses until the brink of exhaustion and beyond, or, well, carving wounds into her hands or arms. As long as she didn't go overboard, her scars would end up manageable, and she wouldn't lose function in her arms. But still, the physical pain drowned out her emotional suffering, and she was accustomed to hurting from the occasional beatings, so she didn't think it strange or anything. Yet right now, the expected relief didn't come. Instead, Izumi felt pain and the accompanying anxiety coursing through her, and she realized with a start that she did not like it. Dropping the knife, she turned on the water and washed the cut, before carefully drying it. Then, she went to the bathroom, grabbing a bandage and applying it on her finger while thinking. Now that's a little strange. I usually either get some relief from pain or don't care about it. Actively disliking it. It's a first. Perhaps it's because I'm feeling a bit better right now, what with All Might believing in me, meaning there's nothing to drown out. But still, I'm normally much more tolerant to physical pain in general. It's weird, no doubt about it. Taking a few breaths to calm herself down, Izumi returned to the kitchen and continued making katsudon while waiting for her mother. After an hour, when Izumi was long done preparing the katsudon and was already contemplating calling her mom, just to be sure that nothing happened to her, she heard a key rattling in the door. Before it opened, a person stumbling through. "Hey Mom!" Izumi called out into the hallway, while putting 2 bowls of katsudon on the table. "Hi Izumi," her mother responded, sounding exceptionally tired. Izumi frowned. "Is everything alright? I've made katsudon if you want." "Oh, thanks, dear," her mom responded, walking into the living room and dropping onto the sofa. "Just, give me a minute." Izumi nodded, moving back to the kitchen for a moment to grab the necessary utensils before coming back, throwing a look at her mother. Even from behind, she looked terribly exhausted and under the weather, a curse clinging to her. Izumi froze, the thought finally registering. A curse is clinging to my mom. Looking up again, she could see the frankly incredibly decrepit curse attached to her mom, almost palpably leeching her strength and energy. Not even enough to resist my quirk by the looks of it. Yet you dare intrude upon my mother, literally the best person in the world? Tamping down on her sudden rage, Izumi started walking to her mom before stopping. "I know she doesn't like my quirk, so I could wait until she's asleep. No, I'm not letting her suffer that long. I can just do something subtle, and she hopefully won't notice." Nodding to herself, she went around the sofa and gently sat down next to her. From close-up, Inko looked even worse, with bags under her eyes and pale, sweaty skin. She's practically ill, yet still worked past her normal time today. "Mom," feeling a surge of guilt, Izumi carefully opened her arms and hugged her mom. After a few seconds, Inko reciprocated, wrapping an arm around her, repositioning her closer and allowing her to lay her head on her shoulder. Izumi closed her eyes for a second, enjoying the closeness, before opening them and locking eyes with the startled curse. She was certain that there was nothing but cold fury in her gaze. She opened her hand, grasping the curse in a split second and activating her quirk. Curse manipulation. The curse was immediately absorbed, its essence going through her arm and being subsumed somewhere around her heart. Izumi shivered for a moment, before noticing her mom slumping over in apparent relief. "Ah, thanks, Izumi," Inko whispered, hugging her even tighter. Izumi immediately felt guilty over her actions. Dang, I forgot that victims of curses can usually tell when it gets removed. And now she knows I've used my quirk. "Dear, if you didn't want to, you didn't have to dash. I'm sorry dash. Izumi froze, registering the completely unexpected words of her mother. She'd expected anger, scorn, coldness, or disappointment at least, yet her mom was apologizing? You're not mad? She hesitantly asked, looking up at her mom, who was showing a mix of confusion and concern. Izumi, Inko began carefully. Why would I be? No, why do you think I would be mad? Izumi murmured, looking away. I thought you didn't like my quirk, and were ashamed of it. Mom? She looked back up in shock, seeing her mother starting to cry. Oh no, now you've upset her, you dumbass dash. Izumi, Inko hiccuped, hugging her daughter even tighter. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She sniffled, while Izumi felt herself getting confused. What is going on? What other interpretation could there be for the implied, no discussing curse manipulation rule at home? Still, she reciprocated the hug for now, allowing herself to indulge for a moment. They stayed like that for a bit, before Inko pulled away, getting up and kneeling down before the couch. Izumi, I realize now I was mistaken, but I still remember how much trouble you received from your quirk during your younger years. Yeah, that treatment is still there. Izumi carefully doesn't mention. No need to worry her mom further. And I thought you disliked it. Inko admitted, Izumi's eyes widening. You almost never spoke about it, and I rarely saw you use it. I thought you didn't want to use or even acknowledge it, and I tried to play along, not prying about it, nor asking you to do anything with it. I didn't want to impose or make your life worse. In a way, I tried to accommodate you. I see now that I was mistaken. We both were. Izumi smiled sadly, before closing her eyes for a moment. It would be difficult, but if her mom was doing this confession, she had to admit her own wrongdoings. I thought that you were the one who'd rather have my quirk not exist, and I didn't want to bother you with it, so… Oh, Izumi, Inko pulled her into another short hug, before returning and looking down for a moment. She seemed to be fumbling for words a little, which prompted Izumi to try to downplay it. Mom, it's fine, you don't need to dash. No, Izumi. Inko shook her head. I have something else to say, if you'd hear it. Seeing Izumi nod, she paused for a second, before continuing. When your quirk came in, I was afraid. But I was also worried for you. I still remember how hurt you were from that spirit. I still recall the aura emanating from it. Speaking of, I got a lot better at it, Mom. Izumi responded, manifesting a small curse for a moment, showing its complete lack of tangible signature, before dismissing it again. That's great. Inko replied, smiling. Regardless, I was scared that you'd be hurt either by those curses, or by other people who didn't understand a thing about you. I was scared by that doctor's proclamation dash. Just give up dash. And even more than that, I felt guilty. I felt like I'd failed you. Instead of getting an awesome telekinetic quirk, maybe fire breathing or pyrokinesis, you were stuck with this. And instead of seeing its strength and potential, considering that spirit was pretty strong for your first, I fixated on everything negative about it, and how other people would see it. That evening, when you asked me if you could be a hero too, there should have been only one answer. And yet? I'm sorry, Izumi. I'm so sorry dash. I failed you again. I selfishly let my fears and guilt control me. A parent should always believe in and support their child, especially their most coveted dream, and I couldn't even do that much. Mom, I dash. Hush, Izumi. Let me finish. Inko, while tearful, raised a hand, and maintained enough composure to speak clearly. For the next years, I watched your spirit slowly deteriorate. You were always a happy and energetic toddler, but afterwards, even when you smiled, it felt false. And stupidly enough, I thought that if it kept you safe, it would be acceptable. A mother shouldn't even entertain such thoughts, and yet I did. Maybe I deluded myself into thinking that it was a temporary fluke, and that you'd find something that'd interest you again, completely forgetting that heroes and quirks were practically your whole life. Again, I selfishly did nothing dash. Mom. Izumi suddenly interrupted, unable to bear it because this was getting ridiculous. I don't blame you for your actions. We established before that we've both made mistakes, and nobody is perfect. I'll admit that not having you in my corner did a number on my self-esteem. But despite everything, you were still there. Some parents would have become distant, abusive, or would have straight up dumped me somewhere on the streets. But you tried. You provided for me, took care of me, and you tried, however misguided, to keep me safe. So please, stop talking like that about yourself. You don't deserve it. Izumi being more adult than the literal adult, what has the world come to? Inko sighed softly, smiling like she'd been handed the sun. After a few seconds, she returned to a slightly more neutral state, a placid smile on her face. I'll admit I spiraled there a bit. But I haven't reached my point yet. Only a year ago did I finally realize that this wasn't a short fluke, that you were wilting away and everything I did up to that point did nothing to help. Admittedly, I didn't exactly know what to do. Apologize for not believing in you? Support your dream? I didn't even know if you still wanted to be a hero. Would my sudden pivot feel like a slap in the face? And the practical bits worried me too. Would you have enough time to get where you need to, physically? And your quirk? I didn't know at the time that you were proficient in using it. Admittedly, I also threw myself a little too hard into work at the time, for which I apologize. I should have paid more attention to you. Inko sighed once more, while Izumi had to bite her tongue so she wouldn't launch her previous spiel again. But today, I saw things. I realized a lot about what I was doing wrong. And if you ask me right now, whether you can become a hero, my answer is simple. With a simple gesture, Inko pulled out her phone from her pocket. Oh my god, attraction is incredible dash, turning it on and showing her screen. A video was playing. One Izumi instantly recognized. It had just been a few hours, after all. You already are one, Izumi. Inko finished, smiling. For a moment, Izumi felt every emotion in existence. Elation at her mother acknowledging her dream. Mortification at her discovering that Izumi just ran to fight a villain. Confusion about why she wasn't upset in the slightest. Momentary irritation at remembering the trash performance of the heroes. Feeling herself short-circuit, Izumi did the only thing she still had bandwidth for. She threw herself into her mother's arms, starting to cry herself from happiness. A few minutes later, she totally didn't flood the apartment. Shut up, Izumi's mind finally rebooted, allowing her to pull away and sit back down on the sofa, asking the question that had been bugging her. You're not upset? That I threw myself into danger? I'm worried, yes. Inko answered. I'm a mother, I'll always be. But I also know that you've always wanted to protect people. You saved Bakugo, doing a better job than literal heroes. Today, you sounded genuinely happy. You saved me, Izumi. Both literally, she gestured vaguely at herself, Izumi catching that she was referring to the curse. And figuratively, by saving yourself. Another gesture, at Izumi this time, before Inko finished. You are my hero, Izumi. Izumi could only think one thing. Mom, I only have so much tears to spare. She flung her arms around her mom again, both of them hugging each other as Izumi felt as if she'd regained something she didn't know she was missing. It felt really good to just her and her mom, with nothing else mattering. Izumi happily ran into the school, for once not feeling a resigned sort of dread at returning here. Well, she probably wouldn't enjoy her remaining time here, but it probably wouldn't be objectively terrible either. Plus, she had a clear goal now, people believing in her, and her mental state was all around better, so she would just deal with anything. Entering the building, she hummed a tune while walking through the hallways, until she reached her class. Oh, hey Deku! One of her classmates, the one with rocks for hair, called out to her just as she entered. Surprised you didn't die to that villain. Must have gone soft on a weak little girl like you. Izumi slowly came to a halt. Conveniently, you forget how Bakugo couldn't win against it. She thought. Of course, she wasn't too surprised by that reaction. Perhaps they were hoping to provoke her into retaliating, thus justifying their hidden fear of her. Well, she suddenly had an idea. I guess I can try a new strategy. Hey Kacchan. She beamed, spotting him in his seat and beelining towards him, completely ignoring the others. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see everyone looking mildly shocked at how unconcerned she was being, and especially her addressing Katsuki again. They knew that Katsuki tended to ignore her, but, well, nerd. Katsuki nodded to her, making her beam again. He was a little stiff still, but it was something. Baby steps. How are you? She asked quietly, dropping her voice to a whisper. Are you hurt? Any injuries? I'm fine. Kacchan responded, sounding annoyed. Worry about yourself more. Sorry. She smiled sheepishly, before giving him a small wave and jogging back to her seat, pulling out her notebook and beginning to write down everything she remembered about the slime quirk, not a care in the world. Oi, Deku. The classmate that had spoken to her before, seemingly infuriated by her refusal to interact, walked towards her. We're not done dash. Oh, that's right. Katsuki suddenly spoke up, silencing everyone. He got out of his seat and walked to the rockhead, stopping a step before him. Izumi subtly tensed, knowing Kacchan's violent tendencies and ready to prevent a murder if necessary. Nobody spoke for a moment. So, first off, Katsuki spoke up, narrowing his eyes. Die. And he kicked Rockhead right in the ball. Izumi physically winced along with the rest of the class as Rockhead collapsed, making interesting noises of pain as he clutched at his crotch. Katsuki leaned over him, his hand sparkling with his quirk. Second dash. Kacchan. No murder. Izumi decided to intervene. In her opinion, what he'd done was more than enough. Katsuki looked at her momentarily, before huffing and straightening up. Fine. You get to live this time. Talk shit about the nerd again and I won't be so generous. That goes for all you extras as well. Comprend? Everyone nodded, seemingly scared shitless, while Izumi just stared with a single question in her mind. Since when does Kacchan know Spanish? Izumi stared at the mountain of trash that effectively constituted Dagoba Beach, her mom next to her. When Izumi had talked about her quirk and brought up her frequent excursions to the cursed world, her mom was unamused, to put it lightly. Look, Izumi, she sighed. You of all people would know that hero work isn't just fighting. But I can tell that you're adept enough that outright forbidding you to fight would just be counterproductive. So let's agree that I'll find you somewhere you can work out in less dangerous conditions, and if you like it, you'll spend half of your training time there, alright? Izumi had agreed, partially so her mom wouldn't worry as much, and partially because she could admit her point. Plus, diversity was the spice of life, so? Hauling trash? Izumi asked jokingly. What am I, the garbage man hero? Inko chuckled in response, ruffling her hair. Consider it community service, dear. She explained. Good heroes contribute to that too. And look on the bright side. If you clear everything, we'll have a nice beach to go to in the summer. Plus, if you want, you can keep interesting things as long as they're not too obtrusive to store. Whether for support items, or just interesting in general, you do you, dear. Fine, Izumi pretended to pout, but honestly she wasn't against the idea at all. In addition to everything her mom mentioned, it was also an opportunity to practice controlling her spirits, both for scoping out the garbage mountain, clearing it out, and hauling it to actual dumping areas. And, well, she liked helping people, and this would help people, so? Alright, I'll watch you for today, Inko replied, moving over and sitting down on a nearby bench. And if you ever want my help in the future, just say so, okay? Yes, Mom. Izumi responded, and looked towards the nearest staircase. A normal person would use it to go down onto the beach, but it was a quarter of a kilometer away, and it would take a few precious minutes to get there. And did she even want to behave like a normal person? Nah. In a smooth movement, she jumped over the fence, starting to fall before summoning the stingray for a split second, slowing herself enough where she could gracefully land on her feet, cursed energy absorbing the impact. Then she looked up at her mom, waving quickly to reassure her, and walked to the nearest pile of trash, humming. Best to start with the smaller things first, so the piles don't randomly collapse. Summoning one of her curses, a hideous toad whose only redeeming quality was the insane amount of space inside of it, she grinned. Alright, let's do this. 2 days later, after school finished, Izumi went back to the cursed world. She decided on a certain rotation to keep things as balanced as possible, 1 day of beach cleanup, 1 day of quirk analysis, 1 day of fighting curses, and 1 day of experimentation with either her spirits or CE. That way, she alternated between training physically and mentally, making sure that things were varied enough without becoming overwhelming. To avoid the issues that occurred the previous time, Izumi took half an hour to look for any genuinely dangerous curses, the white whale in particular. After ensuring that the siren was staying where she should and the white whale was nowhere to be seen, she descended to a random plaza, hitting the ground near a group of curses. She grinned when they noticed her. Hey guys. You get the privilege of being my training appliances. Do not resist dash. A curse's fist flew towards her head as she leaned out of the way, not really feeling threatened. Guess you're resisting. She shrugged. Well, fine by me. Jumping out of the way to evade 2 more strikes, Izumi jumped up and summoned a few spirits of her own to aid her, before throwing herself into battle again. Twist, pivot, summon a curse to distract. Oh, this one overextended, tap you're dead. Lean back, nope, corrected at the last second, jump up and summon the armadillo? Dang, that reflect was juicy. Draw him back, get a few more curses to deal with this one, punch a hole through that one. And absorb these 2, whatever. I can always use more bodies. Landing on her feet and looking around, Izumi saw multiple new curses approaching. This begs the question why they're always drawn to me fighting. CE usage would be the obvious answer, but the natural abundance of CE in this world should obfuscate my presence. Though maybe they can detect spikes of cursed energy usage, or maybe cursed spirit deaths can somehow be sensed by them. The latter actually has points in its favor, since the nurse being absorbed didn't attract anyone to my location. Shrugging off her thoughts, she grinned and ran towards the closest pack of curses once more. On one hand, Toshinori felt grateful for Naomesa's idea of doing a teaching trial run. On the other hand, God, it was hard. He now understood why Aizawa tended to refer to his class as problem children, hellspawn, or hellions. He was supposed to be the #1 hero, always energetic and saving people with a smile, and he still could barely match the level of energy that some of the children exuded. Though on the other hand, Togata, Hato and Amajiki were pretty nice to work with. Togata in particular felt like a kindred spirit, to a degree where All Might could understand why Mirai had suggested him. Still, he's strong on his own. More importantly, I don't get that feeling from him. But even disregarding the children themselves, teaching was hard. He always preferred to punch instead of think, but now he had to remember so many things. Contents of the lesson, what to ask and which answers to expect, etc., then doing paperwork in the form of tests and homework, then actual paperwork like facility reservations. At the very least, he managed to figure out that letting the kids help drive the lesson along aided a ton with both retaining their attention, making sure they felt included, and giving them an outlet for their natural desire for action. He also guessed that once he started teaching next year in earnest, his reputation as All Might could do a lot of heavy lifting. Though Nizu was subtly suggesting that Toshinori Yagi should also be included as a teacher to spare his time limit, with All Might making more exclusive appearances that would make the kids more excited. Well, he could see the merit of that, even if the thought of more schoolwork was giving him shivers. Still, he could admit that watching the kids grow and improve was fun, if nothing else. Teaching did have a certain charm to it. He probably wouldn't become a full-time teacher, but training and teaching his successor. He'd probably enjoy doing it. Wait sheet, I still have to discuss that. Well, again, she's not going anywhere. After 3 months of her training montage, the name felt appropriate. Kacchan decided to show up one day and asked to fight. At first, Izumi was a little confused about the why, but from what she gathered from his explanation, he wanted to be the best and therefore needed to train with the strongest people, which for some reason was her. She kind of thought there were multiple better options he could have chosen, like actual trained adults, if nothing else, but she figured she'd indulge him. What followed was an evening of beating the shit out of each other. Literally. Izumi had no idea how she was still standing post factum. She thought a few times about tapping out during the fight, but her competitiveness decided to raise its head at the worst possible time, so she'd pressed on. On the other hand, Kacchan seemed to take at least as much damage as she did, and now regarded her with both competitiveness and a silent degree of respect. Like a worthy rival. Again, she was unsure if she deserved it, considering she was almost falling over afterwards, but trying to get him to change his mind on anything was fairly difficult for her, and suicidal for basically anyone else, so she didn't try. Her mom was fairly upset at her getting hurt again, but this time she at least had the actual excuse of training. She could still hear the groan of exasperation her mom made, though. The most impressive thing of all was that the next day, Kacchan visited the beach and helped her clean the garbage for the day. Even if he openly admitted he didn't see the point of it, aside from the working out part of it, which he begrudgingly admitted did make some amount of sense, it warmed Izumi's heart that he was willing to occasionally help with things he wouldn't normally do. And the way he'd sundered his way out of accepting any of her thanks was just adorable. In any case, Izumi was glad to see that Kacchan wasn't a bad person, just rough around the edges. We'll make the next All Might out of you yet. 10 months. One day before the entrance exam. It took 10 months, but Izumi had finally done it. She had to stay late in the final days and cut some of her intellectual work, but she'd done it. She'd removed the entire garbage mountain. The entire beach was practically sparkling clean. Izumi, her mom sniffled, looking onto her with maternal pride. You've done so well. Izumi turned and hugged Inko, who immediately started to cry. Izumi chuckled quietly, playfully complaining about flooding the beach with her crying, as she thought back to the preceding months. To her slight disappointment, there weren't all that many useful things in the garbage. To be fair, if she was planning to go into support, she might have found more stuff useful, but it disappointed her slightly anyways. Still, she'd found some electronics, a knife, which seemed to resonate with her cursed energy, so she took it with her, and a really cute necklace, still packaged and all, which she gave to her mom. Inko had tried to refuse, but Izumi used her strongest tactic of puppy eyes, which mom eventually caved to. Eventually, mom stopped trying to reenact the Great Flood by crying, and straightened up, looking Izumi in the eyes. Izumi, dear. I love you. You did superbly. Go kick the entrance exam out of the ballpark now, you hear? Yes, mom. Izumi grinned. I won't disappoint you. You never did, Izumi. Inko shook her head, softly petting her hair as they descended onto the beach, deciding to take a few hours to rest up before the next day. Izumi panted a few times, getting her breathing under control as she stood before the gate to UA. For some reason, the train she was taking decided to experience every delay imaginable, which meant she had to sprint all the way here to reach UA in time. At least using CE helped, and she was accustomed to physical effort due to the cursed world. She'd have loved to use one of her spirits as transport, but she really couldn't afford to get arrested for illegal quirk usage. Not on exam day. You made it, nerd. A gruff voice sounded beside her. Turning to the side, Izumi saw Bakugo approaching her. Did he wait for me or something? Oh, hey Kacchan. She responded after a second, smiling shyly. Good luck for the exam. Humph, he grunted, before turning around and starting to walk to the entrance. Wish I'd received something more than a hum from him. But it's still awesome that he cares. She smiled, before starting to walk towards the building in determination. Alright, let's knock this exam out of the dash. Her feet hit a loose tile. She tripped. This day SCKS. Normally, Izumi would have summoned a curse to catch herself, or cushion her fall at least, but she was already nervous due to nearly being late and, well, the exam itself, so her knee-JRK reaction was just to shield herself with her arms to hopefully avoid slamming face-first into the concrete. Instinctively, she closed her eyes and waited for the pain. Come on. Any day now. Are you okay? A voice asked next to her. Izumi hesitantly peeked out of one eye and found she wasn't falling. No, wait, she was, but the ground wasn't getting closer. Oh. I'm floating. Well, I was falling before, and I'm not now, so, progress, I suppose? She mused, as the other person giggled. Then Izumi tried to reach the ground with her legs, failed, started flailing for about a second before forcibly stilling all movement. I don't suppose you could return the certainty of floor again? The person giggled again, bringing Izumi back to the ground before she felt weight returning to her limbs. Letting out a breath and experimentally moving her arms about, she finally glanced at the one talking to her and saw an incredibly cute brown-haired girl, smiling with her fingers pressed together. Oh, is that your quirk? You can make things float? How is it activated? By touch, and then you touch your hands to deactivate? Can you make multiple things float at once? What about one really big thing? And dash. Jolting out of her excitement, Izumi slapped both hands onto her mouth in mortification, staring fearfully at the girl. Congrats, idiot. A person saves you from embarrassing yourself and actually talks to you, and instead of thanking them properly, you just make yourself appear like a creep. Now she'll just run away, if you're lucky dash. Oh, yes, that's my quirk. The girl responded after a second, smiling hesitantly. Izumi blinked in confusion because she's not running away? She's answering? It's called zero gravity. The girl continued. Anything I touch with 5 fingers becomes weightless. And if I close my fingers, like this, she pressed her fingers together to demonstrate. It cancels the effect. That's so cool. Izumi exclaimed excitedly, before remembering about the exam and looking away due to renewed nervousness. Good luck with the exam. Yeah, you too. Do your best. The girl replied, giving a last smile before starting to walk towards the entrance. Izumi just looked after her, while cheering in her mind. Someone talk to me. She even responded to my quirk-related questions. And zero gravity is so cool. What's her limit? Can she increase gravitational pull instead? What about manipulating it? Perhaps in the future? What about size constraints? Mass? Could she spread the effect onto connected items? What if she suddenly jolted out of her thoughts, remembering about the exam. Sheet, I still need to find the class. Picking up the pace, Izumi started jogging towards the building, finally ready to take the exam. By some slide of luck, Izumi wasn't even that late. She even managed to eke out a few minutes to write down the SparkNotes version of her thoughts on zero gravity. Hopefully it would be enough for her not to forget some important detail. Closing her reserve notebook, Izumi put it away into her bag and placed it beneath her seat just as their proctor, Cementos, came in. Izumi barely repressed the feeling of OMG Cementos, forcing herself to pay attention. Good morning, examinees. I'm Ken Ishiyama, and I'll be your proctor for today. To reiterate, this is the written exam for the hero course. You should have received a card with your exam number on it. Check that the exam at your seat corresponds to it. Cementos took a pause for a few seconds, checking if anybody had misplaced themselves. When nobody moved, he continued. All right. If you haven't turned off your electronics, do so now. Then put your bag beneath your seat. He waited half a minute until everyone stopped shuffling. Your exam copy is in front of you. Wait until I give the start signal before uncovering it. When you begin, please check that you have all the pages, and raise a hand if you don't. This part of the exam will take 3 hours. The exam consists of multiple choice and essay questions. Multiple choice questions use guess correction, for which the elaborate explanation can be found on the first page. For essay questions, we put far more importance in the thoroughness of your answer than its correctness. Speaking your honest opinion and defending it well will net you far more points than trying to engineer one to cater to our supposed preferences. Additionally, don't forget to proofread your exam multiple times if necessary. Finally, a reminder that any cheating is considered grounds for instant disqualification. Any immediate questions? Cementos glanced about, seeing no questions, before nodding to himself and glancing at his wristwatch. You may begin. Izumi, along with every other student, immediately turned her copy around, her eyes quickly flicking over the page. All right, standard guess correction, averaging out at 0? Should review the questions before beginning. First comes multiple choice. Math, sciences, a bit of reading comprehension, some history, oh. There's even an English section. Izumi had begun learning it when particularly bored during another stupid detention in Aldera, which the teachers loved punishing her with because of course the victim was to blame for being bullied. Then she realized that knowing it would allow her to study even more quirks, namely those in English-speaking countries, by reading local news about heroes and listening to videos in their own language, and, well, now she was decently fluent in it, if she could say so herself. At least enough to understand even fairly technical texts. And here are the essays. She thought, seeing the, in her opinion, more exciting part of the exam. Opinions about heroics, some knowledge also about heroics. Some questions about individual heroes, could be interesting. A question about support item design. Man, they really thought of everything. There's some business stuff too, and oh? Izumi reread the question that caught her eye again, not believing her own sight for a second. What do you know about Endeavor's quirk? Describe its strengths and weaknesses, and explain how you would go about fighting him. Any other thoughts and information are welcome as well. Oh my god. Quirk analysis. This is my literal playground. Oh Izumi barely stifled a gasp, turning the page around. Oh my god. There's more. 2 more questions about lesser-known heroes, one about ectoplasm, she'd heard that he was a teacher at UA, so it was most likely because of that, and one that just asked about any interesting quirk she saw today. Which, oh my god. I could go on for hours. Absolutely the best exam I've ever taken. Okay, Izumi, no. Do the other parts first. A thing called time exists. Barely suppressing her excitement to manageable levels, she went back to the beginning and started filling out the questions. 2.5 hours later, Izumi was low-key feeling anxious. She'd filled out all the questions, gushed about quirks in the analysis questions, went to town on heroics opinions, especially that one question about the state of heroics today. She had a few choice words to say about some heroes, totally coincidentally mentioning Death Arms and Company. She'd written down everything she knew about heroics procedures, designed a hopefully not terrible support item. It wasn't really her field of expertise, but she tried her best, hopefully not fudged the business questions, and then decided to review everything, which wasn't going too well. It wasn't an issue of her answers being outright wrong, but the calculations weren't behaving how Izumi expected. The first time, she just selected the answer she'd calculated, but when she looked it over afterwards, it just felt incorrect. But the calculations didn't agree, even on the third time, always pointing to the same answer. Which, Izumi supposed she could trust the calculations, but it still made her anxious. What if she made a simple mistake, forgot a minus somewhere? And the entire equation was messed up now? What if all her equations had mistakes? Izumi took a quiet breath to calm down, and tried to reassure herself that if that was the case, there wouldn't be time fixing them right now. It didn't make her feel better, but at least she managed to convince herself to double-check the essay questions first. After doing so, she was at least pleasantly surprised that she didn't really find much to correct. She was still anxious about her answers, especially since this was one of the first times she would actually show her analysis skills for someone other than her mom and Kacchan, but she managed to assure herself logically that her answers were the best she could come up with, ignoring the whispers telling her not good enough, stupid, failure. Forcing her anxiety down, Izumi went back to editing her previous responses, and managed to arrive at a somewhat satisfactory arrangement mere seconds before the timer buzzed. All right, examinees, it's time. Cementos rumbled. Put your pens down and descend in an orderly fashion to hand in your exam. Afterwards, you have half an hour for lunch and generally to recuperate, after which you'll be expected in the auditorium written down on your examinee card. I'll also add that if you want to dress into something different for the practical, no need to do so yet. You'll receive a quarter hour after the explanation of the practical to do so. Changing rooms will likewise be available. After he finished, Izumi stood up along with the other examinees, heading down to hand in her exam. Half an hour flew by like wind. Izumi had eaten the lunch her mom gave her, stretched a little to try to work off her resident anxiety, and then went to the auditorium where she was expected to be. Now, she was sitting in her designated place, right next to Kacchan of all people. "How'd it go?" she whispered quietly to him. "Don't worry about it." Kacchan huffed. I think I didn't mess up catastrophically." Izumi looked away bashfully. Katsuki just grunted in response, before they got interrupted by movement at the front of the auditorium. "Hello there, examinee listeners." Present Mike walked up onto the stage. Izumi couldn't resist whispering OMG Present Mike to Kacchan, who just rolled his eyes in response, though she could see it was half-hearted. "Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to my show today." Mike continued, spreading his arms. "Everybody say HEY. Hey!" Izumi exclaimed, only a second later realizing that she was literally the only person to react. Burning up from embarrassment, she ducked her head down, wishing to disappear for a second. Present Mike was absolutely undeterred by the lack of reaction aside from her, even pointing finger guns at her. "Thank you, little listener." Izumi perked up at being acknowledged, her previous embarrassment forgotten. She gave Mike a little wave, before turning to Kacchan in excitement. "Did you hear that? I'm officially a little listener," she whispered. "Yes, congrats, nerd." Kacchan hummed in response, as Izumi just basked in her excitement at having talked with Present Mike. The voice hero, one of the most well-known heroes in Japan. "Alright, then, listeners, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the practical." Present Mike continued. "You will be conducting 30-minute mock battles after this. You can bring any registered support items with you. After the explanation, you'll have 15 minutes to head to the testing center designated on your card. If you wish, you should also use that time to change. There are signs leading to the changing rooms." "Different center?" Izumi whispered to Kacchan. "Yeah. I got A. B here. But I thought that would be the case, discouraging implicit teaming between those from the same middle schools." Izumi murmured. "Implicit?" Katsuki looked at her, confused. "I'll ask a question later about whether teaming at all is allowed," she quietly responded, before going back to listening. Each testing center has architecture mimicking a small city. Inside, you'll find 3 types of fake villains. You'll earn points based on their difficulty. Mike explained, as the screen showed the accompanying presentation, a fake Present Mike moving through the streets like a game. You can earn points by either destroying the villain outright, crippling their power source, or preventing it from moving and attacking by some other method. Of course, attacking or otherwise actively obstructing other examinees is forbidden and grounds for immediate disqualification. Additionally, while damaging your surrounding is allowed, greatly excessive damage may incur a penalty in the form of negative points, so try to keep your quirks contained. "May I ask a question?" A few rows below Izumi, an examinee shot up with his hand in the air, strangely reminding Izumi of a robot himself. "On the printout, it says there are 4 types of villains. If this is a misprint, then UA, as the most prominent hero school in Japan, should be ashamed of making such a simple mistake. And you?" The guy with glasses turned around, zeroing in on her, Izumi startling at being addressed. "You've been muttering constantly. It's impolite, not to mention distracting. If you cannot take the exam seriously, leave immediately." Izumi's first thought was to apologize, but then again, she was really quiet before, and she'd whispered only a few times, often conveniently when Present Mike took a pause. Plus, she kind of felt bad for Mike for having to deal with this incarnation of lawful neutral. He didn't seem all that upset, but still, she felt bad. So, she decided to snipe back. "So, first of all," she narrowed her eyes. "Present Mike has never claimed to have finished his explanation. I would consider it impolite, as you said, to ask such presumptive questions before having all the information. Second, I assure you I was being as quiet as possible, enough that I heard Present Mike better than myself, so I do not believe you were genuinely distracted. Third, you were standing up and shouting yourself just now. So, I fail to see your point." She finished. "Fing get him, nerd." Kacchan whispered approvingly, glaring at the guy with glasses. The other examinees snickered as well, as Izumi suddenly felt delayed embarrassment at having spoken up, ducking her head slightly and averting her eyes. "Alright, settle down everyone." Present Mike took over again. "The little listener is correct, I wasn't finished yet. The 4th type of villain is worth 0 points. It's also significantly stronger than the other 3 types, and is to be considered an obstacle rather than a target. There exists one in every testing center. While defeating it isn't impossible, it's also not recommended, nor is there any reason to. So I'd advise avoiding it if possible." "Thank you very much." Glasses guy bowed, before turning to her again. And you brought up very good points. I humbly apologize for my presumptuousness and my interruption. Dude, chill out, Izumi whispered, not at all liking that the attention focused on her again. Luckily, Glasses Guy sat down, and Present Mike continued without further interruption. Alright, that's all from me. Any other questions? Izumi immediately put up her hand. Yes, little listener? I just want to ask one thing, are we at all allowed to team with other people? I like your line of thought, little listener. Present Mike grinned, pointing more finger guns at her. If you want to and can find someone you trust and who trusts you enough to team, then all the more power to you both. Just remember that points cannot be split between people, so you'll automatically need to find more robots to get enough points for the both of you. Okay, what about duration? Izumi suddenly had a thought. For example, can I, hypothetically, decide to split up with my teammate in the middle of the practical, or team with someone else later? That's completely up to your discretion, little listener. We do not regulate teaming, so it's completely up to you. Alright, thank you for your answer, Present Mike. Izumi smiled. Mike grinned at her once more, before looking over the auditorium. Seeing no more questions, he spoke up a final time. Now then, I'll leave you with one final word. It was once said, a true hero is one who overcomes his and life's limits. That's what you are here for, overcoming your limits. Go beyond. Plus ultra. After Present Mike's explanation, Izumi quickly hopped into one of the changing rooms, changing into a tracksuit she'd brought along for the practical. It was easier to move about in than in her normal clothes, it had better thermoregulation properties, it was familiar to her, she'd used it quite a few times in the cursed world, and, well, it was fresh clothing, which would hopefully help her. Now, she'd reached the testing grounds, and was absent-mindedly scoping out the competition and thinking. That guy has many hands, which could be useful for combat. Wait, he changed that arm into an eye. Transformation into any type of limb? If yes, then I was wrong and recon might be even more up his alley. That guy, what the hell, why is he so flamboyant? Seems to have a support item with him, some kind of lens? Energy quirk? Can't tell more. Oh, Glasses Guy is here too. Great. Though now that I'm looking at him better, I could swear he's related to Ingenium. Practically the same quirk except his is in his legs, and they look similar. Oh, the nice girl is here too. From the entrance. Izumi twitched in place for a moment, debating whether or not to approach her, before deciding that they both could use some company. Hey! Izumi bounded over, accidentally startling the poor girl as she turned around. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Izumi quickly apologized, before the girl shook her head. Oh, don't worry, I was just surprised. How did your exam go? Well enough, I think? Izumi shrugged, before smiling shyly. By the way, thank you again for saving me from falling back there. Would have been embarrassing if that happened. Oh, no worries. The brown-haired girl replied. We're all nervous, and it would have been bad luck if you fell, right? Izumi smiled. Thanks again. Both of them fell into a companionable silence, as Izumi drew upon her stores of CE and started circulating some underneath her skin. Technically, it wasn't a prerequisite to use it, but CE behaved better when warmed up, so to speak. When trying to use it immediately, it would respond, but fairly sluggishly, which didn't benefit her reaction times nor synchronization, the latter of which was directly tied to damage. Furthermore, her circulation allowed her to always have some CE at every point of her body, being able to strengthen any part of herself practically at will, instead of having to wait for CE to actually arrive there. After 2 minutes or so, Izumi was pretty much ready to begin, calmly circulating CE while listening to anything around her. However, the exam was still not starting. Around her, she saw examinees starting to relax a little, getting complacent, and she smirked ever so slightly. No way this wasn't intentional. UA is testing if we can remain patient and stay ready to go at a moment's notice. Izumi took another look at the brown-haired girl. She looked fairly nervous, wringing her hands about. Izumi was about to speak up when she suddenly had a thought. Zero gravity, while usable against robots? Definitely isn't top performance against them. And I don't know what its weaknesses are. Teaming is allowed, as Present Mike said, plus the waiting implies that UA didn't give us all the information, meaning it isn't inconceivable that they're grading things other than how many villains are destroyed. Plus, I kinda want to return the favor she did me at the entrance. On one hand, this seems like a stupid idea. On the other, it would be funny. Well, you only live once, I guess. Hey! Izumi whispered to the girl, imperceptibly shifting her feet in the meantime and spinning her CE up another notch. What? The girl startled again, turning to her. Can you remove gravity for us both? Just for 20 or so seconds. I suppose I can, but why? Just a funny idea I had. You can consider it repayment for saving me from faceplanting at the entrance. Do it when I say, now. Izumi grinned, crouching a little. Sure. The girl got cut off by Present Mix shout. Stay aired. Everyone startled in surprise, turning around in confusion. Everyone except one person. Izumi grinned, hooking one arm around the girl, to her surprised squeak, while giving a cheeky wave to Mike, waiting out exactly 1 second. Just enough for the bulk of her CE to condense in her feet. Now. The girl, bless her, didn't hesitate, removing their gravity just in time. The ground behind her nearly detonated as Izumi zipped forward like a bullet, the girl she was carrying shouting in obvious alarm. Izumi just smiled, enjoying the air whipping through her hair. When she wasn't fighting, she loved speed. She loved diving off buildings, catching herself with a curse or two. She loved flying, she loved sprinting, she loved riding her fastest curses, zooming forward until nothing could catch her. Being fast was just so freeing. Against her will, Izumi let loose a laugh, seeing building after building zip by in the conveniently long, straight line she was flying through. The brown-haired girl underneath her arm seemed already accustomed to it a bit, simply watching with apprehension around her. Eventually, as they reached the rough center of the testing ground, if Izumi's estimations weren't mistaken, at least, air friction had slowed them down enough that Izumi summoned 2 curses that hooked themselves into the ground, quickly bringing them to a halt. Gravity Girl released her quirk, letting out a breath as Izumi grinned. That was insane. Don't relax yet. Izumi interrupted, seeing the first robots appear. You've got a free minute, go crazy. Giving Gravity Girl a wave, Izumi ran to the closest robot as the girl jolted out of her shock, running in a different direction. Losing her smile in favor of focus, Izumi channeled cursed energy into her fist, driving it into the closest robot. Surprisingly, the metal gave much more easily than she expected, allowing her fist to find the presumed control center of the robot and crush it. She was shocked for only a moment, before she had to dodge an attack from the side. Summoning a pair of demon-like curses, dark red, horns, tail, the only thing they were missing was wings and a pitchfork, she sicked them onto the robot, which crumpled after a few punches. Meanwhile, she took down the final one in melee range. Alright, not too bad. That's 5 points, I think. Let's continue. Shota was not awake enough for this. First, he was forced into being one of the proctors for the written exams. He couldn't even bring his sleeping bag because somebody hid it from him, citing stupid things like it will scare the examinees. Which meant he had to sit the whole 3 hours in that auditorium, when he could have been catching up on lost sleep. He even had to remove some idiots who thought he wasn't looking and tried to look up the answers. And as if that wasn't enough, their chimera of a principal was in a shockingly good mood, routinely cackling quietly about something. When All Might, the only person stupid enough, asked Nizu what he was so happy about, he simply responded that he'd had the delight of reading one of the examinee's exam copy, and found it highly interesting. The thought that the resident rat had found someone, an examinee no less, interesting, was a terrifying thought. And now he was forced to watch these DMN brats blow up robots. It was moments like these that he questioned why he took up this job at all. Hey, how's it going, peoples? Present Mike, his resident headache, asked as he descended from the roof of their observation point. Well, this year's group definitely looks promising. Midnight reacted, looking over the screens. As an example, examinee 2233 is practically dominating ground A. Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk, explosion. Nizu reacted immediately. Looking at it, he's trained himself well with it, even if he's a bit aggressive compared to the regular applicant, and less inclined to do heroic actions out of his own will. It's good that we have someone specializing in dealing with loose cannons like him, right? God damn it. Shota only sighed in resignation, as his gaze flickered over the other screens, hoping to catch something that wouldn't involve him getting more headaches. Eijiro Kirishima is doing good as well. His quirk is hardening, granting him good melee damage and defense. And he's garnered a decent number of hero points to boot. MHM. On a less intensive level, Tsuyu Azui, Koji Koda and Kyokujiro are all performing well too. Yeah, we've got good kids this time around. Oh, what about you, Sho? Anyone caught your eye? Shota didn't immediately react, his eyes glued to a screen showing a green-haired girl fighting on ground B. Though fighting might be taking it a little too far, as she seemed in no trouble whatsoever. Each attack aimed at her was intercepted by weird entities emerging from nowhere before disappearing, while she herself methodically dismantled each robot before her with surprising strength, despite having a summoning quirk. But even that wasn't what attracted Shota's attention. Oh, the little listener caught your attention as well? Hisashi asked, leaning over his shoulder. I knew you'd like her. You should have seen her sass during the practical explanations. Shota cut his voice off with erasure, before turning back to the screen. It's not that I like her, Zashi. But her fighting style is. She's doing well, right? I don't see any problem. Objectively, it's not bad. Shota reluctantly agreed. It's self-taught, but more importantly, she moves like she's fought before. A lot. The reflexes she's displaying. They remind me more of a trained undergrounder than a kid. Hisashi hummed, luckily being relatively quiet out of respect for his ears. What's her quirk, by the way? Now that's interesting. Nizu replied, looking 1 second away from descending into cackles again and making Shota shiver. Apparently, her quirk allows her to capture and utilize so-called cursed spirits. Which we're seeing right now. But, interestingly, it doesn't mention enhanced strength. How curious. Dear God. Shota shivered. There's more. Hisashi jokingly responded. No. Just no dash. Actually, there is more. Nizu began to cackle, inducing fright in all the UA teachers, before he abruptly stopped, making eye contact with Shota. Want to take a guess at how many points she'll roughly get for the written exam? Before Shota could even contemplate answering, more like refusing to in order to spare his sanity, Yagi suddenly started coughing, blood on his knuckles. What's wrong, Yagi? It's her. He drew closer to the screen, looking hyper-focused. Her? I met her nearly a year ago. Yagi explained awkwardly. Nizu cackled some more, before looking at the clock that showed only a few minutes remaining. Majima, 30 seconds. Nizu said to the support teacher, before turning back to the screen. Shota did the same, noticing her, leaving 3 robots in a half-dead state and just walking away. Before Shota could question it out loud, a flying rock began beating the robots up. That must Toru Hagakure. Nizu elaborated. Her quirk is invisibility. Not really suited for this specific exam, but with the girl's help. You think she left those robots for her? Cementos asked. I'm fairly certain she at least knew about her presence, judging by some of the movements I saw, plus the little wave she gave in no particular direction afterwards. Well, Majima, time for the final test. Nizu waved at them, and Shota along with the others returned his attention to the screens, but not before registering Nizu's final proclamation. Show me how you'll handle this, Izumi Midoriya. Izumi skidded to a stop before one final robot she saw, a single hit causing it to crumble. All in all, she wasn't doing bad at all, if she did say so herself. She honestly was only subconsciously counting how many robots she had destroyed, preferring to focus on further refining her CE control and looking at what the other examinees were doing. For example, she was now certain that Glasses Guy was related to Ingenium. There was just too much of Ingenium's moveset in his. Izumi had also seen Gravity Girl a few times. She was using her quirk to lift the robots into the air, letting them collapse onto the ground afterwards. It did seem like her quirk was taking its toll on her, but it seemed that she was doing quite well. Hopefully, with the boost Izumi had given her back at the beginning, she would get enough points to get in. Furthermore, Izumi had encountered another examinee, probably female, but Izumi was unsure, whose quirk was invisibility. Izumi immediately felt bad for them, having to take this exam full of robots with their quirk giving them very little advantage in actually destroying the robots. But their quirk was just so incredible. Being literally unable to be seen, it would be incredible for scouting, silent takedowns, and a ton more stuff. And that wasn't even counting a potential underlying mechanism of the invisibility. Izumi dearly hoped they'd get into the hero course. And if a few robots were conveniently left unable to move but not destroyed, right in front of invisible person's path. I totally got distracted by not Ingenium taking down a robot, okay? And if you saw my hand doing unphysical movements called waving, no you didn't. Suddenly, the ground rumbled loudly, feeling like an earthquake was starting. Slightly shocked, Izumi used CE to jump upwards, landing on her stingray curse and floating as she turned towards the epicenter, where the buildings were collapsing in the wake of the zero-pointer. It wasn't even moving towards her, but Izumi still felt a shiver of apprehension. UA is really not messing around, I see. Well, you aren't the whale, but I can see why they don't need more than one. In all honesty, while it was kind of pointless, Izumi was still contemplating fighting it. She could absolutely go plus ultra here, as this wasn't the cursed world where she'd have to retain enough energy to fend off any opportunistic curses afterwards. Plus, as far as she knew, UA had Recovery Girl who could fix her up, if necessary. And she didn't have to absorb it afterwards, meaning she could afford to insta-kill it. But then again, there wasn't really any benefit to it either. Defeating a powerful curse at least meant she could absorb it, getting stronger for the next fight. This wasn't the case here. Just as she thought that, she glanced at where the robot was heading, towards the fleeing applicants. Then her gaze was drawn to the fallen rubble before all of her thoughts came to a screeching halt. That's Gravity Girl beneath the rubble. She can't reach it to lift it, and the robot is right there. Distract it while you help the girl. You did so before, Izumi. Surrendering to her instincts, Izumi shot forward like a missile towards the robot. Ochako Uraraka wasn't having the best of days. Or, well, it was fine before, her written exam went fine, she'd made a friend, probably, and said friend gave her an entire minute of lead over everyone else, which she'd used to full effect. And when the exam was almost over, Ochako remembered that luck was a fickle thing, when the zero-pointer appeared and some rubble fell onto her legs, trapping her. Now, she was trying to fiddle around enough to reach the rubble, hoping to float it away and limp out of the way. Though that last one wasn't too likely, judging by the pain in her leg. The other applicants seemed to have already run away, so there was no help to expect from that side either. Behind her, the zero-pointer was advancing, getting closer and closer. Ochako strained herself to reach the rubble, missing by an inch. She fell back, taking a breath or two, before she tried again. Are you okay? A voice above her asked urgently. Belatedly, Ochako realized that somebody was next to her. She looked up and saw, oh, it's the green-haired girl from before. Before she could formulate an answer, the girl just grabbed the plate she was buried under and forcefully yanked it off her, freeing her legs. Ochako just stared in slight shock at the casualness of it. Can you walk? The girl asked, crouching next to her. Ochako suddenly realized she should probably answer, before they get buried under the zero-pointer instead. I can try, but my leg hurts. Yeah, I can see. The girl nodded. No worries. Before Ochako could react, the girl scooped her up, holding her in a bridal carry. I'll try to be gentle, 'kay? She spoke, before starting to sprint away from the robot. Ochako, blushing a little, but deciding to postpone her embarrassment at being carried, chanced to look back at the robot and saw it, swatting at. Are those mosquitoes? She couldn't resist asking. No, just a few expendable spirits of mine. The girl replied without turning her head, before frowning. Wish I still had the mosquito spirit. It would have been funny here. SCKS that it's dead now, sheet. Ochako was jostled about a little as the girl carrying her skidded to a halt just as a shot from the zero-pointer hit a building, making it collapse before them, blocking the road completely. The zero-pointer seemed to have long dealt with the girl's spirits and was advancing towards them. They were trapped. Oh come on, that's just not fair. Who on earth decided it would be a good idea to give it final exam AI? The girl lamented for a few seconds, causing Ochako to get confused amidst her anxiety, before sobering up and looking towards her. Can you remove our gravity again? Why yes, Ochako responded, ignoring her dread at more nausea. But I'll last a minute if I push it, no more. That's fine. I'll make it in half. The girl replied, just as Ochako touched them both, removing their gravity, focusing on fighting her nausea as they floated higher and higher. That robot seems oddly smarter than it should be. Midnight glanced worriedly at the collapsed building and the zero-pointer. Nizu hummed, looking far too amused with the situation for Shota's liking. It wouldn't be inconceivable that someone switched out that specific robot's AI at the last minute. Nizu. Midnight, shocked, turned to the principal. What the hell? The kids aren't even students yet. Wait. Midoriya's doing something. Cementos shushed them, focusing on the screen, as Shota opted to do the same. On the scene, Midoriya was floating upwards, holding the injured girl, Uraraka, the screen supplied, in her arms. The zero-pointer fired a few fake missiles at them, which got intercepted midair by Midoriya's summons. Smart. Ectoplasm remarked. If they jump over the obstacle, they'll be able to evade the zero-pointer long enough for time to run out dash. They're not doing that. Shota interrupted, slightly confused. In his mind, that would have indeed been the most logical decision to take, considering Midoriya had already shown the ability to propel herself in midair, if not literally fly. Instead, she looked as if she was floating towards the zero-pointer, except that wasn't true either, her trajectory would put her a few dozen meters higher. Is that part of her plan? Or did she just misestimate her trajectory? Perhaps Midoriya is overestimating the zero-pointer's pursuit capabilities? Midnight asked. Maybe she wants to go around it? Well, it's reasonable caution. Cementos rumbled in response. The zero-pointer has enough height to still be able to fire at them if they fled. Still, I can only guess at their plan. Everyone went silent afterwards, not wanting to miss a single thing. Shota shivered when he registered that Nizu was cackling quietly, and immediately felt an incoming headache. God damn it. Why did I sign up for this again? Midoriya, meanwhile, deflected a few more projectiles fired by the zero-pointer. She had floated right above it at this point, seemingly telling something to Uraraka. Then, she opened her palm as a small splotch of black appeared underneath her. Out of it fell. Eraserhead had to blink, but the image didn't change. The object that was falling was a stone head. From that one island. East or something. That aside, what's her plan? The zero-pointer's armor is designed to resist most enhancer quirks. Throwing a stone will dent it at most dash. His thoughts got cut off when he noticed something about the head. It almost felt like it had a cyan glow? But the screen didn't display it. It felt like his own eyes overlaid the glow. And then it reached the zero-pointer. Shota widened his eyes when the impacted metal exploded, rocking their observation room, throwing up a huge cloud of smoke and cutting off all nearby cameras. Huh? What dash? What the hell dash? Regaining his composure, Shota snapped his eyes to the right, cutting off Mike with erasure so he wouldn't deafen them all. Then he shuddered when Nizu descended into a full-blown laugh, having a slightly crazy look in his eyes. Turning back to the screen, Shota felt shocked once again. The zero-pointer wasn't simply disabled, it crumpled like a soda can, getting reduced to a pile of bent scrap on the ground. Next to him, Power Loader began muttering about the money losses, insane overpowered children, and generally bemoaning his fate, and Shota could only sigh in agreement. DMN it. Nizu is totally putting her in my class. Why does this year need so many problem children? Izumi floated back down with the help of a curse, carrying the girl in her arms to the ground and doing her best to ignore her self-induced exhaustion. As her feet hit the ground, the girl released her quirk as Izumi gently set her on the ground. Just in time, as she immediately started vomiting. Guess your quirk takes a lot out of you? Izumi asked sympathetically, steadying the girl as she emptied her stomach out. Why yeah, I get nausea if I use it a lot, the girl replied after she regained her composure again. Sorry. Don't worry dash. Alright? Izumi got interrupted by Present Mic's voice. That's time, listeners. Please make your way to the exit of the grounds. If you cannot move or are injured, remain where you are, the medics will get to you. Oh thank God. Izumi whispered, suddenly becoming painfully aware of the exhaustion in all her limbs. She immediately fell on her back, her limbs splayed out like a starfish. This is why I basically never pull out that curse. Are you alright? The girl asked. Opening one eye, Izumi saw that she had sat up, leaning her back on the nearby remains of a robot. Closing her eyes, she took a breath. No. I'm dead. She joked. Never doing that again, though, yeah right, never. Made that same promise like 3 times already. What even was that? Izumi hummed, taking a pause longer than necessary due to her fatigue. I suppose the easiest way to explain is that that's a spirit of mine, that can take my, energy, to amplify its own mass and deal devastating damage. Read, take CE. Also, not mentioning it technically being able to absorb from any source, and its innate CE being used for conditional teleportation instead. Neither would have worked here either way. The main drawback, aside from the whole exhaustion thing, is aiming, for one, since it just falls in a straight line, and the damage being too devastating for most purposes. Like, I can flatten a robot. Flattening a villain will earn me a murder trial at best, Tartarus at worst. Huh? Say, I never told you my name, did I? The girl asked, Izumi flushing as she remembered she could have done that like 3 times before. I'm Ochako Uraraka. Izumi Midoriya. She responded, peeking out one eye and smiling. Nice to meet you. Izumi's hand twitched again, twisting the final line of the sketch she was drawing and ruining it. Resisting a sudden urge to throw something out of the window, she simply sighed, let her pen fall onto the notebook and dropped onto her bed, closing her eyes. After the exam concluded, Izumi and Uraraka, the cute gravity girl, her brain insisted, were helped by Recovery Girl, who healed Uraraka and gave them both some gummies to recover their strength. At that moment, Izumi intensely regretted that she didn't have her notebook with her. A chance for an autograph from Recovery Girl wasn't something that occurred often, and found herself wanting some kind of storage spirit again. Sure, some of her spirits could carry items, even inside themselves, but the issue was that they couldn't be drawn back into her soul while continuing to carry those items. Izumi guessed she'd require a spirit with a technique or technique-adjacent ability related to storage, but so far she hadn't encountered any, unfortunately. Afterwards, Izumi bid Gravity Girl goodbye, and went back home. It's Uraraka. Uraraka. Do you understand, brain? Anyways, she found it somewhat strange that she was able to do so completely in peace. She'd have thought that the bullies from school would try to harass her, as her going to UA was pretty much a known fact. Also, she didn't really conceal her path, and she assumed they'd try further to discourage her from going to UA, especially considering it had been a few months and some people might have already forgotten Kacchan's wrath. But oh well, maybe they were doing the exams in their own chosen schools. In the end, she didn't care too much. Unfortunately, she didn't really get the chance to talk to Kacchan either. But maybe that was for the best, as Izumi was feeling really stressed. When she was doing her exams, it was a lot easier to cope with her stress. At least then, she could change the answer if she came to a different conclusion, or just push herself harder during the practical, which, while being above average, didn't really hit the limits to which she occasionally had to push herself in the cursed world, ignoring the 0-pointer of course. But now that the exam was done but she hadn't received her results yet, her brain kept finding more and more issues with her exam. Even ignoring her lingering uncertainty over the multiple-choice questions, she kept noticing problems with her essays, wanting to rewrite that or that sentence, maybe even add or remove an entire paragraph. And her analysis, too. Why did I even think about gushing so much? There's a reason I keep my notebooks hidden. Now they'll think I'm creepy, disturbing, scary, like the cursed witch you are. The practical didn't really feel better either. After counting everything up, Izumi felt like her results were on the lower end of the spectrum, and she felt like she could have done a lot more. Used more curses, utilized them better to achieve higher speed, agility, strength. If she wasn't pushing herself as hard as in the cursed world, what the F was she even doing there? And the 0-pointer was an issue too. Saving Uraraka didn't help the thought that she'd effectively killed a villain. Fake, of course, but her attack would have been enough to turn almost any person into a pancake. And considering she was basically sure that there were hidden categories of points, and the fact that Present Mike mentioned outright that excessive destruction was penalized, how much would her points get docked for dropping a small nuke onto the field? She should have just hopped over the fallen building and continued running away, losing the robot between the buildings. It wouldn't even have been hard, since she had enough CE for the Moai curse of all things. Instead, like a dumbass, she probably fudged the written exam, then blew up millions of yen worth of equipment while people like Glasses Guy, aka Not Ingenium, actually played by the rules, getting enough points to pass as a result, while she? Izumi huffed in irritation, grabbing her blanket and draping it over herself, refusing to cry over this. So what if I won't get in? You failed and you know it. I can take the second exam at another school. Will that really satisfy you? I'll be fine. Liar. Just shut up, stupid brain, Izumi whispered, squeezing her eyes shut. It brought her no comfort. Katsuki really didn't know what to do. He'd expected the nerd to be over the moon after taking the UA exam, maybe gushing to him about the UA teachers, the quirks she saw, or at the very least asking him how his practical went, like there was any way it could have gone other than excellent, but that wasn't the point. Even if it annoyed him, it would have been much better than this, resigned sulking that the nerd was doing. From his point of view, it really didn't make any FING sense. There was simply no way the nerd could fail. She was a veritable genius, far outpacing most people if she wanted to, including him. Double that with her analysis capabilities, he'd barely resisted cackling when he saw quirk analysis on the exam, and her mind was FING frightening. Katsuki genuinely believed that if she felt like it, she could win against most heroes without even using her quirk, simply banking on her insane analytical capabilities. And with her quirk added into the mix, she fought him to a standstill a few months ago. Considering how much he'd trained with his own quirk, for becoming the #1 hero. Not because of the nerd. It wasn't a trivial achievement. Regardless, Katsuki thought it was simply not possible for her not to get into UA. That made it all the stranger seeing the nerd so demotivated and evasive regarding her performance. She didn't even react in any way when someone accused her of getting no points. He saw that she preferred not to engage when people called her a witch or sorceress, but such a dumbass opinion should have gotten her to snap back. It doesn't make any FING sense. Why the F does she think she F'd up? I've seen her abilities and reflexes during our spar, she knows how to fight. Blowing up a bunch of robots should have been trivial for her. And her written exam, seriously, if she somehow got worse than me on it, I'll explode my own face. She's a FING genius, it's just not possible. Alright, class, settle down. The teacher entering ripped Katsuki out of his thoughts. He grunted, side-eyeing the nerd, who didn't seem to have noticed the teacher, just tapping her finger on the desk. Midoriya, are you with us? The teacher asked after a moment. The nerd twitched in response, turning her startled gaze upward. Ah, yes, sorry, I'm here. She responded, sounding way more skittish than normal, her hands twitching in place. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. She looks more stressed than resigned right now. Does she just doubt herself? God FINGDMN it. People are so complicated. Ha, did you get stuck daydreaming about a better quirk? A dumbass extra asked, Katsuki narrowing his eyes, figuring he didn't sufficiently hammer the lesson in back then. When Izumi didn't react aside from a bit of pain in her eyes, and before Katsuki could snap back, another one, the winged dumbass who used to be one of his hanger-ons, went one step further. Well, you can always take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a better quirk, if anyone will even listen to a witch like you. Everyone in the class went utterly silent. Katsuki himself froze, his eyes widening in horror. Are they all FING suicidal? Did they just wake up today and decide to die? Because holy F dash, even I know not to provoke the nerd, especially this way. Do they not realize how FING lethal she would be if she became a villain? I know I didn't lose against her during our spar, but neither of us went to our limits either. If she wanted, she could kill off most of the school in a minute. She's reacting dash. Izumi slowly raised her head as Katsuki felt himself freeze, a heavy atmosphere suddenly starting to weigh him down. Her posture was controlled, too controlled. Her hands were clasped together and not twitching for once, her expression was deceptively even, and her eyes, they were glowing, burning with incandescent rage, emitting almost tangible hate towards the speaker who looked a second from wetting himself. Yet only a second later, the heavy atmosphere lifted again, the rage in Izumi's eyes replaced by apathy as she laid her head back down onto her arms. You don't make sense. She quietly spoke, seemingly not realizing she was talking out loud. If you want to kill me, yet no one would listen to my wish for a better quirk, as you say, what incentive would I ever have for taking your advice? The nonchalance in her voice genuinely spooked Katsuki. How the F is she so unconcerned about literally receiving a death threat of all things? Don't tell me this is what she's been dealing with on a daily basis before the slime fucker incident? Not now, got to do something first. Nodding to himself, he got up and, ignoring the teacher's cries, walked up to the swan dive extra, grabbed him by the collar, and threw him into a wall. Hearing the extra's bones crack from the impact felt extremely satisfying. He slowly walked over, reaching over to grab the extra. Bakugo. The teacher interrupted him, making him glare at the teacher out of the corner of his eye. You shouldn't attack your fellow students. You sure were okay with FING death threats. So what? Katsuki challenged. Are you going to do something about this? Rightfully, he knew that he'd get a slap on the wrist at most. For some reason, those fuckers seemed intent on getting him into UA as some kind of prestige ploy, and ended up forgiving practically any transgressions on his part. Though he tended not to see a point in abusing it, with this being one of the rare times. And either way, whatever punishment they could devise would be more than worth making sure that those extras stopped bullying Izumi, both for her and for their own well-being. Worthless as those extras were, he understood that if Izumi snapped, dying would probably be the easy way out. Fine. The teacher sighed, walking over to the winged extra. I'll help Tsubasa to the infirmary. You go sit back down. Katsuki simply grunted, watching as the extra waddled outside with the teacher's help, before turning to the others. Now listen carefully dash. Kacchan, can you please not make a scene? Izumi suddenly spoke up. I'm not stupid enough to take Tsubasa's advice. Mom would be sad. And, well, I don't know what happens to my spirits when I die. She finished with a hollow smile that didn't reach her eyes. Katsuki tsked in response. Fine. Consider this my final warning. He simply said, dropping down into the chair. The nerd was upset now, everyone else was utterly silent, and Katsuki himself was feeling irritation festering inside him, like a swarm of bugs crawling over his skin. FING hell. What a disaster of a day. Izumi? Izumi? Aya. Izumi startled, looking up from her empty rice bowl. Yes, Mom? Is something wrong? You've been lost in thought for a while. No, nothing's wrong. Izumi tried to reassure her, smiling. I was just thinking about this quirk I saw today. Her mother seemed to see through the lie, but luckily didn't push the issue. But if anything bothers you, you can always come talk to me, okay? Yes, Mom. Izumi responded, getting up and sitting down on the couch while Mom put the plates away. She grabbed the remote, turning on the TV and flicking to a random hero channel, letting it play in the background as she sank into thought. All of this, really SCKS. The incident during school a few days ago really shook her. I've had spider lilies painted on my desk before, but it's much different when somebody says it to my face. Doubly so considering I had the feeling Tsubasa really meant it, judging by his undertones. He was always one of the most prominent bullies, but to go to this degree. It can't be ignorance at this point. Does he just enjoy causing pain, or does he fear me to this degree? I don't remember doing anything that scary to him. She'd lie if she said she never thought about doing it, especially in the last years before meeting All Might, but she was lately much better at ignoring those thoughts. But being so roughly confronted with it again, it was genuinely shocking. And Izumi would lie again if she said she didn't entertain the thought afterwards. Purely hypothetically. As a mere what if. What would happen if I didn't come home that day? If anyone would miss me? How the world would change? Now imagine the real thing. But there was a much more severe issue that spooked her that day. I lost control for a second. I lost control over my cursed energy and my spirit's influence. For just a moment, I genuinely felt like I was about to murder him. That can't be how a hero acts, right? Heroes are supposed to save people, not cripple them for mere words. And I just dash. Izumi squeezed her eyes shut, holding her breath for a few seconds before exhaling, to try to calm herself down. Stop spiraling. Middle school is almost over, you'll never have to see them again. That was just a small mistake. A fluke. Was it? Shush. She tried to silence the thoughts. There's a reason why high school is often considered a fresh start. I can just say that my control slipped for a second. Considering nobody got hurt, it's excusable. Everyone makes mistakes. Does that make it right? Izumi. Her mom suddenly threw open the door, apparently having returned from the entrance. Izumi spun around, her battle-trained instincts already priming her quirk and her CE, when she saw her mom squeaking in, apparently, half excitement and half panic, holding up the UA results? Already? Hopping off the sofa, totally not miscoordinating and nearly falling off, Izumi walked over to her mom, accepting the letter with her suddenly clammy hands. Her stress suddenly spiked, making her feel both hot and cold. Her next years, her very future hinged on what was inside that envelope. I'll open it in my room, Mom. Izumi responded nervously, fiddling with the letter. Her mom nodded, enveloping her in a short hug. Okay. I just want you to know that no matter how you did, I'm still incredibly proud of you, Izumi. Never forget that, okay? Yes, Mom. Izumi hesitantly returned the hug for a few seconds, before stepping away and heading to her room, still incredibly nervous. She knew that her mom meant well, but it only intensified her anxiety. If I fail now? I won't even be able to look her in the eyes now, will I? Yes, keep hiding from your failures. Izumi gently clicked the door shut, before trotting over to her desk and sitting down, placing the letter in front of her. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she felt like she was sick, stars dancing across her vision. Pass or fail? Pass or fail? Pass or? Okay, fine. Rip off the band-aid. If this was just a nice dream of a foolish girl, it's time to wake up. She gritted her teeth from frustration. Before violently grabbing the envelope, accidentally applying cursed energy and tearing it open as a hologram disc fell out? As it landed onto the desk, it suddenly activated, projecting a video that revealed. Toshinori sighed again, fiddling with his costume. Unfortunately, it was tailored for his active form, which meant that since he figured it would be best to conserve energy before and between takes, it didn't really fit his normal form well. He knew it would be fine when he buffed up, but it was still uncomfortable. And to add fuel to the fire, his first take would be for the green-haired girl, young Midoriya. Now, nearly a year later, he still didn't really know what to think of her. Well, on the surface level, everything was fine, good even, she was smart, God help them all when she meets Nizu, had a powerful quirk, was very proficient with it, even impressing Eraserhead of all people, had the base combat skills to back it up, and was kind to boot, helping some weaker examinees subtly, and less subtly in one case, of course. The issue was that he really was not one step closer to figuring out the one-for-all conundrum. It wasn't even like he didn't think of it, because he did. A lot. Young Midoriya lived practically rent-free in his head. And on paper, she seemed like the perfect candidate, for all of the aforementioned reasons. And, well, that feeling hadn't disappeared. On the contrary, when young Midoriya demolished the zero-pointer while protecting young Uraraka, he'd felt that feeling again. Yet still, he kept second-guessing himself, feeling a bit of apprehension each time he thought about it. What if she refused? What if she did accept, but couldn't handle it, or the associated legacy? Toshinori didn't want to force a child to carry the weight of the world like he did. At least he chose it. It felt unfair to force a child to do that. Wouldn't that be the case for everyone? He'd thought about talking to someone about it, but the few times he tried, something always came up. Like when he tried to go to Naomesa a few months ago, he got involved in so many villain fights instead, it wasn't funny. Then he put it off for when he'd feel less winded, and then something else would come up, and then the detective would be busy, and then his tenure as a teacher got in the way, and, admittedly, he didn't even have that many people to talk to. Really, the only people he could discuss comparatively sensitive information with were Nizu, Recovery Girl, Gran Torino, Night Eye, David Shield, and of course Naomasa. The first two fell off because Toshinori felt like they'd bully him into passing on One for All without giving him time to consider his own concerns, since he could tell they were getting a bit restless about him still not having a successor. Gran Torino was a terrifying menace that he didn't dare to contact if he could avoid it. Mirai and him didn't talk at all since All for One's defeat. David was really busy lately with something, so Toshinori tried not to bother him. That left Naomasa, and, well, he'd explained the issues with that already. Yagi? Yagi, it's your cue. Power Loader's voice jolted him out of his thoughts. Yes, I'll get right on it. He nodded, immediately buffing up and walking over to his designated position, hiding his nerves behind his signature smile. Power Loader fiddled with the setup for a few seconds, before giving him the go-ahead sign. Toshinori took a breath. I am here. As a projection. All Might? Izumi yelped in shock, certain that she would have dropped the holodisk had she been holding it. Wadash. I'm really glad to see you again, young Midoriya, and doubly glad seeing you take your first step towards becoming a hero. Also, you probably don't know this yet, but the truth is, you're looking at UA's newest faculty member. Eh? Izumi mumbled. So wait, I was right? That he was here for UA? Also, if that's the case, All Might doesn't seem to be slowing down yet, but, is he retiring? When? This year? Later? With his active time seemingly dropping, how long will he hold on dash? Well, young Midoriya, All Might continued, Izumi jolting out of her thoughts and realizing he had been talking with someone off-screen. Without further ado, let us move on to your exam results. Izumi tried her best to ignore her stomach making somersaults, her adrenaline spiking, stars intensifying at the edge of her vision. She gritted her teeth and did her best to keep paying attention to All Might's words, ignoring a twinge of resignation on the periphery of her consciousness. To begin with, your written exam was exemplary. You achieved a perfect score on all questions, and your essays, on analysis in particular, have been a magnificent read. Between the two of us, Principal Nizu himself took a keen interest in your exam. If that isn't a testament to your genius, I don't know what is. Izumi just stared with her mouth open, completely silent as no sound was able to capture her genuine astonishment. Exemplary? Magnificent read? I thought I would count myself lucky if I got in the top 1%. You're telling me I got perfect? And he said Nizu was interested. Nizu. As in, principal of UA, smartest being on the planet Nizu. What the F? Moving right along, your performance in the practical did not disappoint either. On the contrary, you performed exceptionally. In particular, your takedown of the zero-pointer together with Uraraka was a brilliant display of teamwork, impressing the entire faculty. Regardless, on villain points alone, you have scored an incredible 104 points. That is certainly enough to secure yourself a spot in the hero course. However, here at UA, we do not content ourselves with simply being good enough. You see, young Midoriya, villain points were not the only category graded during the exam. Izumi was seriously not used to this level of praise. She was barely able to keep breathing, unwilling to miss a single detail of the recording. A hero's job doesn't merely consist of fighting villains. Back when heroism was in its infancy, most heroes did community service, small acts of kindness towards others. From simply carrying groceries for older men and ladies, through helping stuck kids get down, to saving people from those who would do them harm. Izumi noticed All Might's eyes cloud over for a split second, as if remembering something, before it vanished. That, at its core, is what being a hero is all about, saving people in every way. From surrendering your seat on the bus, to giving millions hope as the symbol of peace. And you, young Midoriya, seem to understand this better than anyone. The hologram changed to an assembly of camera images, showing an arrangement of Izumi's actions during the exam. The beginning of the exam, when she bolted forward like a missile together with Uraraka, God that looks weird from the side, then saving two examinees from falling rubble, clipping a robot that was about to attack someone from behind, leaving some robots for invisible person, lifting a robot's remains from someone trapped under it, leaving robots for invisible person again. Wait, I did it twice? I'm usually better at remembering things, giving a hand to someone caught in a pincer attack by robots, and more acts like that. And of course obliterating the zero-pointer together with Uraraka. Izumi had to pinch her nose from slight embarrassment. She was still not used to positive attention, especially this level of it. How could we, as heroes, turn a blind eye to all these heroic actions? Thus, I reveal to you the second metric by which we graded the practical, rescue points. It was intentionally kept secret to encourage people to act out of the goodness of their heart, even to their own detriment, not expecting anything in return. Yet, it would be the height of hypocrisy if we simply ignored it on our end. All Might paused, taking a breath. Did he just say all of that in a single breath? His lung capacity must be so high, what the hell? With that said, many other applicants understood this as well. I can mention your friend, young Uraraka, in particular. However, none of them even come close to you, young Midoriya. For your exemplary performance, you've been awarded an astonishing 112 rescue points. Totaling up to 216 points, you have not only passed the practical exam with flying colors, but also far surpassed everyone else, and achieved, together with Katsuki Bakugo, a tied first place. This was Nizu's idea, don't blame me. All Might added in a quieter voice. Izumi still kind of missed the remark, instead making the most unscientific noise she was capable of producing, her brain deciding to take a vacation from this actual insanity. Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. Inko kept pacing in front of Izumi's door, trying, and honestly failing, to calm her nerves. Behind the door, arguably the most important moment of Izumi's life so far was happening. Regardless of what information UA had delivered in that letter, Inko knew that it would make or break her baby girl. She was admittedly really worried for her daughter the last few days, or at least a lot more worried than normally. With Izumi's smarts and quirk aptitude, Inko frankly did not expect her to encounter something insurmountable during the exam. Yet when Izumi returned, she was really jittery and nervous, and was fairly evasive when questioned about the exam. At the very least she still talked excitedly about all the heroes and quirks she saw, and even implied she'd made a tentative friend, which made Inko unbelievably happy, considering she had basically no one for a good decade. Then, the very first day Izumi had gone back to Aldera, she returned completely lost in thought, gloomy and even a tad apathetic. Inko didn't know what happened. She could guess, of course. Aldera's kids were never kind to her daughter, but decided to let her be, mostly, while reaffirming the option for Izumi to talk to her, which was noted but declined, not unexpectedly, unfortunately. Her daughter had always disliked burdening other people with what she saw as her problems only. Nevertheless, Inko could only hope that Izumi had made it into UA. She knew that it was one of Izumi's most important dreams, and she didn't dare imagine what it would do to her daughter if she wasn't accepted. Izumi's mental state, even from her point of view, already wasn't the most stable, with the erratic mood swings being the most prominent. From what she could tell, Izumi tended to be excessively affected by events around her, sometimes being on cloud nine from a little affection or seeing something exciting, and sometimes getting depressed from a minor error. Still, Inko understood that failing UA's exam would genuinely break her daughter, but she refused to even consider what she could do in that case. Even the thought of seeing the light in her daughter's eyes snuffed out again was too much for her to handle, so Inko could only keep hoping that Izumi made it. Suddenly, Inko heard a crash in Izumi's room. Before she could even think of running inside to check on her daughter or at least call out to her, the door was thrown wide open and Izumi ran out, barreling into her and almost knocking both of them over as she started crying into her shoulder. Inko tensed in fear for a moment, but Izumi's sobs didn't sound desperate, sad, or even remotely negative. Instead there was an odd lightness to them. A bit relieved, Inko gently reached out and stroked her daughter's hair in an attempt to calm her, as she led her to the couch in the living room, sitting down with her daughter next to her. Izumi seemed a little more composed, lifting her tearful eyes, which contrasted so hard with her absolutely blinding smile. "Mom," she breathed. "I got in. I passed the exam. I got into UA's hero course." Inko simply pulled her daughter into another hug. Words failed to express how happy she was for Izumi. Her daughter, who looked like she'd been granted the world. Inko was so proud of her. Later, she would nearly spontaneously combust upon learning that instead of simply getting in, Izumi got the best possible score on the exam, and first place for the practical. What the F dash? We tied? Izumi flinched slightly from Kacchan's shout, before shaking it off and sitting down on the nearby bench. Yes, Kacchan, she sighed, pulling her knees up and hugging them. We tied. And please don't shout so loud, I can hear you just fine. F dash, alright. Kacchan, luckily, went a little quieter in response. Did you know about rescue points beforehand? What? No, I didn't. Izumi protested. I did consider the possibility that UA didn't only grade combat abilities, but I had no concrete information. I just helped people because it seemed like the right thing to do. And come on, some of their quirks were so cool. There was an invisible person, totally not ingenium, and dash. Okay, I get it. Humph. Kacchan grumbled and turned his nose away. Izumi, despite her slight embarrassment over her love for Quirk's rearing its head again, almost giggled about his standoffish attitude towards any acts of kindness. Why do you ask? Just wanted to figure out why the F, you didn't even get half my villain points. You're not weak, so it made no FING sense. Oh, Izumi tried to ignore her blush at the veiled compliment, at least she thought it was a compliment? To Kacchan, it might have just been a statement of fact. How much robots did you fight? I don't remember a moment where I wasn't blowing those fuckers sky high. Oh. She nodded. That makes a bit more sense. I didn't get particularly lucky with them, with most encounters only having 1 to 2 robots. Plus, well, I stopped to help people a few times. A few, she says. Kacchan snorted, Izumi ducking her head in embarrassment. Also, who the F is Nizu? Eh? Izumi was genuinely startled. You don't know Nizu? Come on, he's the smartest, most adorable rat you'll find. And he's the principal of UA. UA's principal is a rat? Kacchan looked so incredibly confused that Izumi had to literally bite her tongue to not cackle out loud. At the very least, he looks like a rat. Or maybe a stoat. Or a gerbil. Izumi descended into mutters again. Perhaps a mix of them? Is that possible? Oh dash, she suddenly remembered she was talking. Why did you even ask? I want to know who the F put us in a tie, so I can have words with them. Oh, I'm sorry dash. Can it, nerd? Kacchan interrupted her half-hearted apology. It's not your fault. It's just unsatisfying. Izumi mumbled quietly. I guess I can understand. Also, can you maybe not antagonize the principal of UA? You know, the school you'll be enrolled in for the next 3 years. Ugh, FING fine. Kacchan, albeit reluctantly, seemed to acquiesce. Izumi breathed a sigh of relief. No need to do damage control yet. Izumi, do you have extra tissues? Yeah, I do, Mom. Izumi nodded, nervously doing the final checks. And your handkerchief? You did get that, right? And your notebook dash. Yes, Mom, I triple-checked at this point. Izumi snapped, before immediately wilting from guilt. Sorry, I'm just stressed. I know dear, I am too. Inko smiled as Izumi grabbed her school bag, before pulling her into a hug. Izumi, her mom sniffled. I'm really, really proud of you, you know? Yes Mom, Izumi hugged her a little tighter for a few seconds, before releasing and stepping towards the door. Good luck on your first day, dear. Yes Mom. Izumi smiled, opening the door and waving. I'll be off. Izumi leaned on the nearby wall, coughing a few times while catching her breath. She was athletic enough, but trying to ascend a dozen floors via stairs immediately after running a marathon to the school was a bit much even for her. Ugh, I really need to figure out a more reliable way for transporting myself without people accusing me of unlicensed Quirk usage. CE reinforcement is a decent substitute, but it's imperfect because I don't seem to be able to generate CE in meaningful quantities by myself, and spirit energy is limited. Finally, feeling like she could walk again without keeling over, Izumi started walking through the hallway, keeping an eye out for her class while marveling at, well, everything. Everything is just so cool here. The stairs are comfortable and not annoying nor steep, as much as stairs can be, and the elevators are spacey and move fast. Ostensibly, I didn't experience them myself yet. The floors are nice, not slippery or vice versa, the sight from the windows is awesome, and oh, there's another vent. Strange, UA seems to have a lot of vents. Do they just have an overly sophisticated ventilation system, or is it camouflaging something more important? Oh here's 1A. In her distraction, Izumi almost hadn't noticed that she'd reached her class. Aside from a sign on the wall showing the name, it was also inscribed on a very large door. I mean, the inclusivity is nice, definitely better than Aldera, she involuntarily thought. But it's just so DMN big. Feels like it's made with elephants in mind. Do we have a student with an elephant quirk? Or any big quirk in general? Maybe it's meant for someone like that one villain defeated by Kamui. Okay, Izumi, stop. She interrupted herself. Imagine explaining you were late due to thinking about quirks. Izumi began lifting her hands towards the door when a thought occurred to her. Wait, there are 2 hero classes, 1A and 1B. Who will be in which class? I don't really know how they're sorted. Is it random? Will Gravity Girl be here or in 1B? What about the invisible person? Kacchan? And not Ingenium Izumi stopped, humming. Actually, I wouldn't be upset if he isn't in 1A, at least. Not a fan of people overly obsessed with rules and forcing it on everyone else. Sighing, she steeled herself, sliding the door open and seeing. She barely resisted facepalming. Incredibly disrespectful. Not Ingenium was lecturing Kacchan, which Izumi realized she was not surprised about in the slightest. Also, why the air chops? To reiterate, you should not put your foot on school property. It constitutes incredible disrespect towards the other students, the creators of this desk, and UA as a whole. Shut the F up, for eyes. Kacchan drawled in response. Don't think you can tell me what to do. F for eyes? Not Ingenium sputtered as Izumi almost sighed. He better get used to that. Anyways, Bakugo, I still insist you comport yourself with the dignity worthy of this fine establishment. Putting your foot on school property indicates dash. Shut up. Kacchan cut him off. And then, in a moment that Izumi would giggle about for hours, Kacchan, wearing the most deadpan expression possible, placed a second foot onto the table. While Izumi frantically tried to avoid devolving into laughter, Kacchan leaned back and smirked at Not Ingenium, who looked like he was 2 seconds away from an aneurysm. Anyways, while this amused Izumi to no end, she suddenly felt compelled to point out something. Kacchan. She smiled, startling him slightly. You're about to fall. Indeed, just as she'd said that, his chair finally began tipping over. Quickly grabbing the desk, while his feet were still on it, he pulled himself upwards, righting his chair with a grimace. Izumi winced in sympathy at the seemingly uncomfortable movement. That would have probably strained me too. Even if I'm flexible enough to do the splits, if I tried to do them suddenly, I'd totally dislocate something. Midoriya. Before Kacchan could react, Not Ingenium walked, though marched would be more accurate, towards her and bowed right in front of her? Also, how does he know my name? Did he already somehow obtain and study every single person's name? I just got through reading the important documents just this morning. I wish once again to sincerely apologize for my conduct during the exam. Clearly, you were not unserious in the slightest and possessed superior comprehension about the exam, even grasping the system behind rescue points, obtaining another way to gather dash. Pardon? Izumi had to interrupt, something in his speech rubbing her very wrong. I didn't know anything about rescue points. I didn't help people out of some vain desire for self-benefit. If someone is in danger, or otherwise needs help, your first thought should not be about the benefit for yourself. So, she narrowed her eyes. I would appreciate it if you didn't insinuate otherwise. Not Ingenium stood in thought for a moment, before bowing again. You are completely right. I did not think about that. In fact, that makes you even more worthy of respect than otherwise. I apologize for assuming, and I hope we continue this year as friends. I am Tenya Ida, by the way. Izumi Midoriya. She reciprocated the bow after a second of deliberation, deciding that Ida wasn't malicious in his actions, so he deserved at least one chance. Or a dozen, by the way, Ida. As in Ingenium? How did you? Ida seemed greatly surprised, which prompted Izumi to raise an eyebrow, confused why he thought it wasn't obvious. After a second, she nodded towards his legs. Tenya Ida. Quirk, engine. Located in legs. She methodically recited. Ingenium. Quirk, engine. Located in arms. Similar appearance and effect of Quirk. Similar build. Appearance, Izumi hummed, leafing through her memory for a second. Seems similar, minus glasses. Ingenium's agency, Team Ida 10. Deciphered as Ida? T-Tensei, I assume. Izumi barely caught herself from saying, Tenya. That's Ingenium's real name, right? I take it you two are related? Ida seemed, mildly shocked, to say the least, by her knowledge, before sighing. He's my older brother, yes. May I ask how you know all this? I mean. I like heroes. Izumi suddenly got embarrassed. That's putting it mildly. Kacchan snorted, suddenly inserting himself into the conversation. The nerd could probably describe the detailed eating habits of any given Japanese hero. Or any other trivia piece, really. Kacchan. Izumi whined, flushing instantly, before realizing that she actually could and blushing further. Ah, right, Bakugo. Thank you for reminding me. I was not yet done lecturing you. Ida, wait dash Izumi stretched out her hand, but Ida was already gone, beginning to argue with Kacchan, who really didn't seem to take him seriously. Izumi sighed. DMN, should have warned him that it's pointless. A voice hesitantly addressed her. Turning to the side, she saw a floating UA uniform. Wait. Is that? Oh, you're the invisible girl. From the exam, right? Izumi responded excitedly. Why yeah, that's me. The clothes almost seemed to chip her up, before wilting again. I wanted to say sorry for stealing your robots during the exam. Robots? Izumi felt confused for a moment, her brain a little stuck on seeing her quirk from close-up for the first time. Invisibility is just so cool dash. I meant those robots that you immobilized but didn't destroy. Invisible Girl explained. I thought you wanted to keep them for something. Oh. Izumi suddenly recalled what she was talking about, before quickly moving to reassure her. Don't worry about it. It was a free-for-all, and it wasn't like you stole a kill from under my nose. Plus, she lowered her voice to a whisper. Between the two of us, your quirk is absolutely awesome for heroics. I mean, reconnaissance, spying, fighting an enemy who can't see your moves. So many possibilities. It would have been a shame if you hadn't gotten in because of some measly robots, right? I suppose so. The girl fidgeted a little bit, before straightening up. Oh, by the way, I'm Toru Hagakure. Nice to meet you, Midori. Midori? Izumi tilted her head in faint amusement. Oh, I'm sorry, it was just a nickname dash. And no, don't worry. Izumi had to immediately reassure a panicking Hagakure. I guess I was just surprised to receive a nickname half a second after meeting you. Midori? That's so cute. A voice gasped behind her. Uraraka. Izumi spun around and greeted her excitedly. You're in this class too? Uraraka nodded. Also, thanks for teaming with me for a bit during the practical. I don't think I would have gotten in without the rescue points from that, so… Oh, no worries. Izumi felt like she was permanently blushing at this point, completely unused to how friendly the class was so far. It was fun if nothing else. She smiled. Did she just help everyone dash? Somebody asked quietly in class. No dash. Yes. Kacchan calmly responded over her denial. Also, he was apparently sitting on the desk now. Ida was just staring at him with a look of resignation. Kacchan. She pouted, turning towards him, just as. If you're here to make friends, you can leave right now. Spooked, Izumi felt her combat instincts immediately take over as she spun back around and used one arm to pull Uraraka behind herself, interposing herself between her and the door, narrowing her eyes at the yellow sleeping bag. With a human inside? Enemy? An intruder? Inoue? Alarms are off, but there are dozens of quirks capable of spoofing them dash. At least one of you seems to have some instincts. The man muttered, his eyes momentarily flashing with something akin to approval, before he slowly emerged out of his sleeping bag. Izumi didn't relax, however, as his physical state didn't exactly inspire trust. He looks more like a homeless person than a teacher, God forgive me, and he talks like he's about to die. Although that scarf seems familiar. It took the rest of you 8 seconds to go silent. The man shook his head slowly. Quite irrational. If you want to become a hero, you can't afford to waste time like that. With that in mind, I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher. Nice to meet you. The entire class gasped in surprise. Izumi felt herself relaxing ever so slightly in the meantime, at least enough to lower the arm in front of Uraraka, as she tried to recall where she'd seen that scarf. Anyways, a stack of UA uniforms appeared from. Izumi really had no clue. They were just suddenly there on the desk closest to Aizawa-sensei. Put on this uniform and come onto the field. Sensei, what about the orientation? Another girl, the raven-haired one sitting in the back, Izumi could tell, asked, raising her hand. If you care more about an irrelevant ceremony, the door is right here. Aizawa drawled before walking away. The rest of the class seemed a bit stunned into silence, while Izumi herself had mixed feelings about it. On one hand, at first glance, their teacher didn't seem exactly friendly, though still better than most Aldera teachers, since he didn't seem outright malicious either. On the other? At the very least, he doesn't waste any time. I can get behind that. Eventually, everyone unfroze and started moving. Izumi quickly grabbed a uniform and started walking briskly towards the changing rooms when suddenly, something clicked in her brain. Unassuming clothes. White scarf. Looks like death. No visible quirk signs. Shota Aizawa. UA teacher, therefore most likely a pro-hero. Not well known, since I didn't recognize him immediately. Most likely underground. Fitting all these criteria? The erasure hero. Eraserhead. Midori? Izumi was pulled out of her thoughts by Uraraka shaking her arm lightly. She realized she'd stopped from the realization, a grin slowly spreading over her face from the surging excitement. It's nothing. Izumi waved her off, though unable to shake off her grin, before suddenly breaking off into a sprint towards the changing rooms, accidentally inciting everyone else to follow her rapidly. If I'm fast enough, maybe I'll be able to. Shota sighed again, walking onto the field and stopping. In an ideal world, the students would be here already, waiting for him so he didn't have to waste time. Alas, this was not an ideal world. But for the first time in forever, he felt grateful for that. It gave him time to ponder his new resident problem child. Even at first glance, back at the exam, Shota knew that Midoriya would be a headache. People with summoning quirks tended to stay back, letting their summons fight, which made them woefully unprepared against an opponent getting close. Or, well, having erasure. Yet Midoriya, paradoxically, interweaved her own melee attacks with those of her summons, them almost flowing like water around her as she crushed the robots, using super strength that wasn't in her file, which, to be completely fair, was woefully inadequate, basically only having her Quirk's name, designation, and a sentence of description. No information on what the deal was with these cursed spirits, who even names them like that. No internal workings, no section on vestigial mutations, no limits, no weaknesses. It was a mess. Nizu apparently pulled some information together for a more or less comprehensive file, but for some reason declined to share it with the faculty, which oh god. And that was not nearly the end of the story. During the exam, not only did Midoriya have undeclared super strength, but she also had battle instincts impossible to obtain through training alone. Shota, being a trained hero himself, clearly saw that she was used to fighting and had stared danger in the face enough times to be completely unfazed, even the 0-pointer not scaring her. Shota had a personal hypothesis that Midoriya's spirits could not be controlled without defeating them first. That was how another summoning quirk he knew worked, which meant she'd gain that experience by fighting the spirits. It was his preferred theory, because it meant Midoriya wasn't an unknown vigilante, nor harshly trained in secret by someone. Still, Shota was secretly impressed with her performance. Aside from the 0-pointer thing. Despite her victory being visually impressive, Shota felt that staying to fight was not the optimal strategy. Uraraka was injured, and Midoriya could have simply evaded the robot for a minute or two. Not to mention that her left her completely exhausted afterwards, unable to continue moving. In the real world, that would have been unacceptable. Although, the other teachers disagreed, practically showering her with rescue points for that. Well, since her performance before that was leagues better than he was used to, he could give her a pass for that. And then it was revealed to him that Midoriya also got perfect on the written exam. In any case, when Shota had approached class in the morning, in his sleeping bag just to throw off the brats, he mostly wanted to test the problem child's reaction. When he just arrived, she didn't seem to have noticed him, but as he made his presence known, he saw those instincts kicking in again. In a blink, Midoriya was in front of Uraraka, apparently completely prepared for a battle. A student trying to fight a pro hero would normally be laughable, but with her instincts. It didn't help that there was absolutely no fear or hesitation in her gaze. She genuinely would attack him if she had to. It was, well, if nothing else, she seems to have a good foundation. Time will tell if she can utilize it. His thoughts got interrupted by, God damn it, that's the problem child, jogging towards him, with an eerily excited grin on her face. Too excited. He already felt exhaustion setting in. Well, maybe the test will knock her down a peg, who am I kidding, she'll ace it. The expulsion threat? Equally negligible dash. Aizawa-sensei. The problem child spoke up, sliding to a stop in front of him. Are you Eraserhead? What? Shota could not make any other response because what? I'm an undergrounder. I didn't even use my quirk. How? Oh, I just thought. Midoriya took a breath and started to ramble. Your scarf is the same one that Eraserhead wears. Can't see the goggles, are they hidden behind the scarf? Black, unassuming clothing, similar to Eraserhead. Apparent exhaustion, consistent with going out at nighttime, when Eraserhead is sighted most often. UA teacher, therefore likely a pro hero, but not easily recognizable. Eraserhead is an undergrounder, therefore also not widely known. No visible vestigial or quirk-related mutations observed. Eraserhead's quirk is erasure, manifests in the eyes. Bloodshot eyes. Quirk-related symptom. Midoriya suddenly went to grab something. A notebook maybe? Of course, she was in just a sports uniform, so she didn't find whatever she sought, but it didn't stop her either. Does erasure have an effect on the eyes? Midoriya continued mumbling, undeterred, apparently reciting from pure memory, messing with her fingers as if she was itching to write something down. Not inherently, simply a consequence of extended non-blinking? Required to maintain FOV for effect? Unconfirmed, need more information. Eye contact basis unlikely, erasure was shown to not be single target. Circumventable via obstacles, smoke bombs, or any other weapon effective against eyes. What about mirrors? Usable to extend FOV? If yes, what happens if erasure's user affects themselves? If erasure is immune to itself, it means that a hypothetical quirk constructed to match some internal structure of erasure, but otherwise different, would also be immune. If not, a hypothetical method could be devised, changing the frequency of erasure's effect from static to 2 times distance to mirror divided by speed of light. Oh, is it even truly light? If mirrors do not reflect, postulate that erasure's effect is not light, nor anything physical in the first place, but simply a change of state in the area delimited by FOV, equivalent to an enforced condition of no quirks? Oh dash. Shota couldn't resist, and had to facepalm, which instantly jolted Midoriya out of her mumbling, and caused her to apparently interpret his action incorrectly. Oh, I'm so sorry, sensei, I must have been mistaken dash. No, it's fine, Midoriya. Shota interrupted, sighing. Just didn't expect a child to be able to connect so many dots, without even seeing my quirk or goggles in action. You're right, I am Eraserhead. Midoriya practically visibly brightened up, almost vibrating in place, before she was back muttering again about something. Shota just stared in slight fear at the problem child. Seriously, what the hell? Where do all those ideas come from? And how did I not think to try mirrors yet? Alright, new resolution, never let Nizu meet her. Otherwise, the world will end. Somewhere far away, he swore he could hear the rat cackle. Izumi barely managed to force herself to stop her mumbling spree in time. She really couldn't help it, Eraserhead was just so cool. All Might was undoubtedly her favorite hero, but Eraserhead was also definitely up there. Quick, efficient, and a great example when it came to fighting quirkless. When Izumi had comparatively few strong spirits, she would watch Eraserhead's battles for hours, analyzing his moves and incorporating his moves to devise a sort of hit-and-run tactic to grind down progressively stronger curses. And, well, after discovering cursed energy, she revisited that again, focusing on close combat this time, weaving it into her own style of fighting. She should have brought her notebook with her thoughts on Eraserhead. It was, just, he's here. In the flesh. I can ask questions. Analyze his quirk. Suggest experiments. It's just, so. Eventually, through sheer force of will, Izumi blocked off the constant flow of thoughts on erasure, returning her focus to the outside world and seeing the rest of the class jogging towards them. Oddly enough, the girl seemed to keep a bit of distance from the boys, particularly the midget, and seemed annoyed about something? Well, it's just the first day. I'm sure it's nothing serious. I mean, look at me and Ida. 10 minutes. Aizawa droned as her other classmates stopped next to her. In that time, a bunch of civilians could have died. You'll have to improve. It is illogical to waste time. Anyways, welcome to the quirk assessment test. He continued, before picking up a ball and tossing it to Kacchan. Bakugo, what was your best softball throw in middle school? 67 meters. Kacchan replied, uncharacteristically serious, spinning the ball in his hand once. Good. Come here and do it with your quirk this time. Aizawa nodded to the circle behind him. You can do whatever you wish as long as the ball's core isn't destroyed, and you don't leave the circle. Well, if you say so, Kacchan grinned, moving into position and winding up for a throw. Die! With a cry and an explosion, the ball was sent hurtling into the distance. Izumi winced a little from the sound, before sighing. Kacchan, you can't just say die when throwing a ball. Figure out your own limits first. Aizawa drawled as his measuring device pinged, showing a distance of 705.2 meters. Then you can begin to be molded into proper heroes. What the hell? Murmurs rose from the other students. 705 meters? We get to use our quirks? That's so manly. Yeah, this'll be fun. Fun, huh? Aizawa slowly spoke, Izumi instinctively tensing at the threatening tone. You've made it to the hero course, and all you can think of is fun? Then, how about this, we'll make a little competition out of it. The person in last place after all 8 tests will be judged as having no potential, and will be instantly expelled. The class went silent from shock, before exploding again. What? You can't. It's only the first day, that's not fair dash. Nothing about real life is fair. Aizawa responded in a monotone. Natural disasters, accidents, villains. None of them will play fair. Best to be prepared for that. Then he paused, before glancing towards her. Got something to add, Midoriya? Izumi startled slightly, apparently having been unable to hide her feelings about all this. Aizawa started to remind her more of her Aldra teachers with this. Even if he didn't bully her specifically, it still felt wrong. Why is it physical tests again? We've already beaten the entrance exam, which was robots galore. And besides, yes, I do have to question your rationale, sir. Izumi forced her nerves deep down and spoke up, glaring at her teacher. I won't point out anyone in particular, but I can name at least 2 students here whose quirk would be absolutely amazing for heroics, yet it doesn't help them at all in physical tests, which UA decided to throw at us a second time. We've all made it past the entrance exam, which, I'll remind you, is beating up robots. It seems odd to me that the first challenge would end up with a student, who otherwise made it perfectly fine into the course, getting instantly expelled. Furthermore, is it not a school's job to guide new students along the path to becoming a hero? The way I see it, a good school should give students the tools and support they need to become better, and present obstacles that push them but can be overcome, not punish them for the slightest inadequacy. Tacking onto this, I would understand, to a small degree, of course, see previous points, if a universal threshold of failure got you expelled. But what would you do if everyone did well? Perhaps even exceptionally? Would you still expel a perfectly good student for being slightly behind their peers? From my point of view, it seems, Izumi narrowed her eyes. Illogical, sensei. Izumi finished, and took a breath, registering afterwards that the rest of the class was looking at her with, "Is that admiration? No, it can't be, it really isn't that special, just some thoughts of mine." She then realized that Aizawa's eyes looked like he was oscillating between approval and slight fear, and then another thing. Holy F dash. I just berated Eraser Head. I'm going to get FING expelled now dash. You make some decent points, Midoriya. Aizawa decided to unfreeze at that moment, Izumi looking up in confusion. You're welcome to interpret my threat however you will, but allow me to expand a little on the rest. He narrowed his eyes, adopting a particularly serious expression. Heroics are a dangerous profession. Your potential, your skill and your training can all mean the difference between life and death. A pause as the class gasped quietly. Izumi, for her part, nodded along, the cursed world having beaten that lesson into her a long time ago. Being a hero requires having a good physical baseline, as a lot of your work will involve physical activity. Of course, I am here to teach you, but it will require significant effort from you as well. If you can't even beat something as simple as this test, I would rather expel you than read your name in the obituaries later. As morbid as it was, Izumi found herself relaxing slightly, finally understanding the picture from Aizawa's perspective. Even if she still disagreed with literal expulsion, she could see an expectation for UA students to have a solid foundation to build off of. Classic investment and return. The best school would have the steepest requirements for the highest education quality. The inverse is also true. And the language used by Aizawa implied that the threat might have been a sham. Which, on one hand, was still upsetting, but now that Izumi thought further. Considering how Aizawa seemed pretty positive about my reaction, cautious hostility, to his first appearance, and his seeming approval right now, it might be a ruse instead, teaching us not to trust things at face value and do our own thinking and analysis. Oh, and about your comment on Quirk usability, Aizawa smirked, which was terrifying in Izumi's opinion. I won't dock points on technicalities. Be creative. Huh? Izumi thought. Circumvention is a valid strategy? Anyways, Midoriya, since you were so excited, why don't you start off? Ida, come over as well. Aizawa motioned to them both. We'll begin with the 50-meter dash. 2 questions. Izumi had to speak up. Can we use our quirks before the test begins? As preparation? Yes, as long as you don't affect the track, or similar, before you start the test. Aizawa sighed. Second question? Can I let one of my spirits run the dash instead of myself? Izumi asked, intentionally being a bit unspecific to hopefully glean more information. You do need to participate in the test. Aizawa responded, before giving her a little grin. Make of that what you will. I'll stop you if you do anything truly illegal. Sure. Thank you, sensei. Izumi chirped, before getting into position and summoning a snake curse, letting it enlarge itself and having it curl under her feet, ready to go. Ida seemed confused. Intend to win by using this, reptile? Yes. Izumi deadpanned, crouching and steadying herself on the snake's neck, before having a devious idea and turning back towards Ida, pasting a sweet smile onto herself. But if you feel bad, you could run a little slower, Come on, take some pity on this poor little maiden, would you? Ida almost recoiled in shock. That's not dash. Start. Aizawa deadpanned. Izumi didn't waste a moment, the snake's body instantly bursting forward similar to a spring. At top speed, she could only use this move once per day before having the snake retreat to recuperate from the strain, but it also allowed her to clear most of the track in half a second. Hopping down, she commanded the snake to retract towards its head this time while reinforcing herself with CE and dashing forward, clearing the rest of the track and achieving 1.53 seconds timing. She commanded her spirit to approach her and dismissed it, while watching with faint amusement as a flustered Ida reached the finish line, only getting 4.12 seconds. Your previous transgressions are hereby forgiven. Izumi smiled like an angel, faintly hearing Kacchan cackle in the background. Ida, on the other hand. Midoriya, you should not obstruct your fellow students from taking the test. But I didn't obstruct the test, right sensei? Izumi, still smiling, turned to Aizawa. All I did was banter a little, before the test even began. Which, by the way, so did Ida. I'll allow it. Aizawa nodded after a second of deliberation, his eyes displaying definite interest. Getting distracted is a rookie mistake. You can't afford to make those as a hero. Ah, of course. That makes sense. My apologies, Midoriya. It's whatever, dude, Izumi waved Ida off. We're even now, and it's just a bit of fun on my part. Sorry about that. No, I should not have gotten distracted either. I shall not make this mistake again. Careful. Izumi teased slightly as they walked back. I might interpret that as a challenge. Ida tensed for a moment, before nodding back in an absolutely determined expression. In all seriousness, Izumi wasn't about to actually try to distract him again, as that would just be mean at that point. But it was pretty funny to see Ida so determined to combat a non-existent threat. All in all, the tests were really exciting for her so far. Not to mention that this was the first time she saw the others' quirks in detail. They were just so cool, and were used in such creative ways. For example, during the 50-meter dash, the French guy, Yuga Aoyama, Ida had apparently really memorized everyone's names already and shared them with her semi-unprompted, used his laser quirk to propel himself forward. Uraraka made herself weightless and cleared the track in a single dash, almost as fast as Ida. Zero used his tape as a grappling hook. Todoroki casually iced the entire track and slid over the ice. For the grip strength test, Izumi just used CE reinforcement, plus a spirit with good physical strength, and, like, arms and hands, which not all spirits possessed, over her hand, which got her a pretty nice score. Though it was nothing compared to Yaoyorozu, the raven-haired girl, with, in her opinion, one of the most fascinating quirks in the class, the ability to create anything, who constructed a vice to break the measurer in a single move. The rest didn't fall behind either. Shoji grew multiple arms and used them all on one measurer. Ojiro used his tail on a measurer, which admittedly looked funny. Sato apparently had a sugar-based strength quirk, which also netted him high points. During the long jump, Izumi went last for once, using a, well, flying curse and easily earning first place. To be fair, it was close. Kacchan had apparently learned how to fly while she wasn't looking, like when did that happen? But his control was still unrefined, so it was more of a very long jump, and he didn't manage to keep himself in the air as long as she did. The others were admittedly much more mediocre this time around. The frog girl, Azui, did pretty well, as a frog would, but nowhere as good as Izumi or Kacchan. Todoroki opted to compete normally for some reason, which was strange as Izumi had stood on her curse and wasn't disqualified, so him making an ice bridge should have been equally legal. Although, he looked a bit cold after the dash. Maybe he wanted to avoid temperature-related backlash? But his dad is Endeavor, and his air color scheme indicates a dual quirk. Ice and fire? Why not use the other to offset? Anyways, Yaoyorozu didn't do anything exceptional either this time, simply pole vaulting over the pit. It was a bit of a waste in Izumi's opinion, as creating a decent jetpack, or even a catapult or something, would have easily gotten her top. Oh well. Next came the repeated side steps, during which the midget Mineta bounced himself between two stacks of his ball, which apparently bounced him away while sticking to everything else. As it were, it gave him first place, to Izumi's unexpected chagrin, which she didn't really understand. Even if the girl seemed uncomfortable, it is fine, right? I don't even know what happened, plus first offense and all that. I shouldn't get mad. Right? At least she could replicate his strategy to a less efficient degree, mostly relying on her natural nimbleness and using a few curses as safety cushions. Interestingly, the pink acid girl, Ashido, also got very good points here, her movements almost looking like she was dancing. The softball throw was something. Kacchan requested to redo his throw, which Aizawa allowed on grounds of the previous throw being for demonstration purposes, gaining a good 750 meters with change. Kota called for a bird to carry his ball. Todoroki made this huge ice slide that he threw the ball on top of, which then rolled ever so slowly downwards. Yaoyorozu created a freaking cannon. Yet even she was dwarfed by Uraraka, who simply gave the ball a slight push, and sent it to space. Izumi almost collapsed from giggling when she casually took first place with an infinity score. Alright, Midoriya, it's your turn. Aizawa drawled. Izumi nodded, starting to walk towards the circle, sidestepping the midget. On second thought, he's really freaking close dash. A hand landed on her but squeezed it. Izumi froze mid-step. She had allowed herself to relax. She thought she would be safe here. She thought everything would be fine. She grew complacent. Her mental barriers were down. She was unprepared, not ready, defenseless. She couldn't. Panic flooded her mind. Don't go to you. A. Cursed girl dash. You'll never be a hero dash. Maybe you can help us with things other than your quirk dash. Sorceress which. Her mind went blank. Pure instinct took over. Quirk active, cursed energy flaring, she moved. Something's off. Her thoughts were drowned out by screaming. In hindsight, Shota should have done something differently. Noticed what was happening a second faster, only used his scarf, but most importantly, he really had no business being this careless for all these years. In his defense, erasure had always been a useful tool for him, both to defeat villains and keep his own students in line. Most people were over-reliant on their quirks, so take them away and they'll have nothing to fall back on. Coupled with the red eyes and floating hair, it was a great intimidation tool that he used often. Not to mention that the effect of his quirk was pretty binary, in that either a quirk was a non-mutation and erased completely, or it wasn't and it was left unaffected. Aside from some minor apprehension or discomfort, no student had experienced any adverse effects from his quirk. Unfortunately, this had duped him into thinking that it would always be the case. And now, it finally came to a head. After he'd picked up another ball for Midoriya and turned around, he'd noticed what Mineta was attempting to do. Thinking on his feet, he threw his scarf towards Mineta to restrain him, but a stray piece of dust forced him to blink, delaying the activation of his quirk. He didn't really know if it would have made a difference. It probably would have. Whether good or bad is another question. In any case, this delay was enough for Mineta's hand to reach Izumi, who started spinning around with a raised fist as a blob of eyes began emerging from a black surface in the air. To be fair, with that in mind, not using erasure would have meant that Midoriya would attack Mineta, in addition to whatever her spirit did. So he chose the other option, activating his quirk. In his mind, it would have stopped them both, and allowed him to separate them and prevent any violence. Instead, four things happened at once. Mineta seemed to freeze in place. The black splotch that the spirit was still emerging from abruptly closed, cleaving it down the middle, the cut-off parts falling to the ground and rapidly turning to smoke. Midoriya herself lost her footing and collapsed on the ground with a scream, writhing on the floor with her body spasming intensely. At the same time, a malevolent aura exploded from her, pinning everyone in place. Pressing down from above, clogging the airways, squeezing the heart, bringing images of pain-suffering death. Through sheer force of will, Shota forced himself to blink, cutting off the flow of his quirk. In that moment, the hostile atmosphere instantly receded, feeling like water going down the drain, before it vanished completely. Not wasting a second, he pulled on his scarf to drag Mineta closer and away from Midoriya as he sprinted towards the collapsed girl, completely bypassing the midget to check on her. Midoriya. Shota knelt next to the girl, who'd already began getting up. What the F dash? Are you dash? I'm fine, sensei. Midoriya hissed through her teeth, getting on her hands and knees. I just didn't expect my quirk to be erased. That was my mistake. Yeah, Shota didn't believe a single word. Even if she tried to hide it, the girl was shivering, her tone was too even, and her entire posture was tense and guarded, if not outright hostile. And, well, that was not simply her quirk erased. Midoriya seemed, for lack of a better word, like a cornered animal. Hurt. Defensive. On edge. Tearing his gaze away, he took a look around and found who he was looking for. Well, to be fair, she was 2 steps away, fidgeting with worry. Uraraka, help Midoriya to the infirmary dash. No, sensei. A hand grabbed his arm, feeling like it was trying to crush him. Looking down in surprise, he saw Midoriya's green eyes alight, burning into him, fake confidence mixing in with desperation. I am fine. Midoriya. Shota frowned. You've done excellently so far, and you're in no danger of expulsion, but you're in no state to continue like that. Go to recovery girl so she can check dash. I said no, sensei. Midoriya stubbornly refused, her eyes continuing to glare at him. I'm not injured. I can continue. I want to. Continue. Shota almost sighed. Whyy, problem child? Why couldn't you be rational for once? Why do you insist on being this stubborn to your own detriment? Ugh, forget it. Fine. He sighed, remembering about Mineta and getting up. Ida, keep an eye on the class. Midoriya, I'll allow you to stay, but the instant you feel worse, go to recovery girl immediately. Uraraka will help if necessary. And I'll expel you if you keep refusing. Agreed. He scowled towards her, though careful not to activate his quirk, considering her reaction to it. Midoriya held his gaze for a few seconds, before looking away, the toxic green glow finally flickering out. Fine, sensei. She gritted out. Shota nodded, before walking away towards the principal, dragging a shell-shocked Mineta behind him.
Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed the video just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, You will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.